you're going to publish?
At the one hand, a unifying force for the movement which has been split by the established, the oppressor. It aims more than that to be a vehicle for building for debate and discussion and analysis toward building a revolutionary or effective black ideology for black liberation. So Harold Cruz has written about the crisis of the Negro intellectual. E. Franklin Frazier, the late sociologist, wrote about it in 1962 in an article in Negro Digest he called The Failure of the Negro Intellectual. So we think that we need to begin to play our role and do something about it.
Mm.
We have to crawl before we walk. In Algiers, I made contacts. I got articles, for example, the first issue will have an article from Souké Touré, who is the head of Guinea. We have the commissioner for youth and culture from Dahomey, who is the most popular speaker at the conference. He will have an article in there, which has been translated from the French specifically for us. And in both cases, we'll have one from Stokely and one from Eldridge, one from Leroy Jones, one from John O'Killens, the novelist. And I made contact over there with other journals, and we're going to build an international magazine because the struggle has to be worldwide. It cannot be, it certainly has to be outside the confines of the United States. I think that one can get bogged down on reacting to insignificant and tragic individuals such as Hayakawa, and then he gets pulled down to his own level. So I think that at some level, at some point, one has to move to a new level and to begin to try to do something worthwhile rather than just fighting the horrible people such as Hayakawa.
Do you have any regrets at all about the whole fight over the Black Studies program at State?
I think it was necessary, inevitable. I think that it was very great. I think the students did the best job in the United States, and I think that other people feel the same way about it. And one reason why they've been so hard on them, I've been traveling all over the country in the past year or so, and I certainly have said many times that the Black students at State College are the most meaningful in the whole country.
Dr. Nathan Hare. Good morning, good evening, good everything. Hey, Dr. Carr.
Hey, Professor Hunter, how are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you very clearly. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for playing it for the world. We need to recognize that brother made transition on Monday at 91 out in the Bay Area.
There's so many people that we don't know. There's so many people. And as I sit with you now, 223 consecutive Saturdays. I've missed a couple. You have not.
No, you missed a week.
But I'm also realizing that this work was done before, right? And so not that I'm just realizing that. I feel like, people do books and they have platforms and they act like they're the first people to ever do this thing. And
yes. Well, it's hard to advance your professional interests, particularly in white spaces, if you don't frame it with this is unknown history. We're the first. We're recovering. You can't recognize what comes before you because you become less marketable.
And that's the thing that is so infuriating that we've allowed that to happen. When I'm listening to this man, even though he talks faster than LaRee Daniel Favors, which I didn't.
And he got faster as he got older.
Jesus.
Nathan Hare is a machine gun. A machine gun. Yes.
I'm thinking that, that pursuit of personal aggrandizement has been our undoing on all fronts, right? Mm-hmm. And the lack of sheer will to reclaim what happened thousands of years, hundreds of years, to bring those voices back. So we are not starting from scratch. We should never have to start from scratch. Work was done already. Work was done on reparations. Work was done to build the education system. Work was done to build economic empowerment. Work was already done. Blueprints were done. Things were done successfully. All we need to do is blow the dust off of them and read. Oh, this was done. Okay. Matter of fact, I got this book in the mail yesterday. It just came out. I don't know if y'all could see this.
A Passionate Mind, A Relentless Pursuit, The Vision of Mary McLeod Bethune.
Okay.
Yes, my friend Leeway Brooks, who comes out of the West Coast, came out of some of those very institutions that Nathan and Julia Hare, his partner, who we have to talk about. You can't talk about Nathan Hare without Julia Hare. They were very much about that, helped establish out there. In fact, comrades with some of the people who set up some of the institutions that the current Vice President of the United States and her sister frequented. So when Kamala Harris says she went to Kwanzaa's out there and everybody came for her, they opened their mouths and put their little brains on display. You should be quiet if you don't understand where people come from. So yeah, no leeway. So she's written up. Is it a biography of Bethune? Is it her writing?
It's
the Bethune wrote about herself. You know, this is the thing.
No, it's the vision. It's the vision.
So I mean, it's not.
So let me just read from the first pages. It starts in November 1938. Bull Connor, the commissioner of public safety in Birmingham, Alabama. Pause. We all know Bull Connor, right? And I've only known him through, Eyes on the Prize and all this. The commissioner of public safety in Birmingham, Alabama, and an ardent segregationist threatened to arrest Eleanor Roosevelt for sitting with Black people in public.
Wait, this is where it starts.
This is the opening page. First page. Let me just. Okay,
yeah, that's good. That's good. Go ahead.
Okay. What said Bull Connor, the first lady, and 1,200 bystanders on a collision course, was the inaugural meeting of the Southern Conference for Human Welfare.
Right.
A group formed to discuss how Alabama and the rest of the South could reduce poverty, improve the equitable enforcement of civil and constitutional rights, make credit and banking more widely available across racial lines, improve public education, reform the sharecropping/farm tenancy system, and embrace democracy by repealing the poll tax. For many who thought things in the South were fine as they were, the Black people, disenfranchised, uneducated, undereducated, overtaxed, these goals were controversial and led to charges in the local press that the conference was a front for socialist and communist sympathizers. But more than fear about the group's political agendas, the cries of race mixing garnered the lion's share of public and media attention. Newspaper articles reported that members of the city's Ku Klux Klan had found a woman who represented white women Democrats and was coming forward to warn everyone that the gathering was a ruse to allow Black men and white women to engage in sex with one another. And here we go, right? So Black people convene. Eleanor Roosevelt, First Lady, President's wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, is coming in to talk about economic empowerment, political empowerment, social empowerment, education empowerment. And here they come with the white mixing, race mixing, and it distracts everyone. And Bull Connor is arrested because of this race mixing thing. And I'm thinking about
before you leave, this is a book on Mary McLeod Bethune, not Eleanor Roosevelt, right?
Correct.
So when does Mary McLeod Bethune?
Oh, you're saying something right now, but
I'm assuming that I'm not going to
hold on. Hold on. Let me Eleanor Roosevelt. Okay, here we go. Page.
What page and where?
All right. So it goes on for another page with Bull Connor, Eleanor Roosevelt, and this is where things stood with Eleanor Roosevelt when Eleanor Roosevelt arrived with Mary McLeod Bethune by her side. There we go.
Okay, so
all right, ignoring the police officer. Okay.
Let me ask you as an editor, as a writer and an editor, because I'm not going to assume that Dr. Rooks started that book the way it's in our hands now. It's in your hands. Given that Miss Bethune left a voluminous archive, her house, which is also National Council of Negro Women headquarters, is a historical site, is here in Logan Square in D.C. Papers are there. Shout out to Betty Collier Thomas, who helped preserve those, and all of the sisters. My dear friend Ida Jones, who's now the archivist at Morgan State University and an author herself, including a book on Mary McLeod Bethune in Washington. There are plenty of papers. If, let's say, Professor Rooks began her draft with Mary McLeod Bethune was concerned, as she had invited Eleanor Roosevelt to it. Now, I'm wondering, and then if the editor said, hold on, because I'm assuming this is Third World Press, Africa World Press, Black Classic Press. Which press is this?
Significations. Wait, hold on. I think it's HarperCollins, but it's a division. Let me go to the Penguin.
Who
Penguins,
blurbed it?
series edited by Henry Louis Gates Jr.
The skipper. The skip's involved.
Okay, all right. Pause there, Dr. Carr. Come on.
Oh.
So here's my question. Because
Well, I just want to.
you be ruining this stuff for everybody.
No,
Let me just say, we can't read nothing. What?
I just want to get to this because when we played Nathan here, the president of San Francisco State University, interim president Hayakawa, fired Nathan Hare from the stage after he had been at San Francisco State for 1 year, setting up the Black Studies program, which is why people call him the father of Black Studies. After Howard had let him go, we'll get into this. But my point is this: Hare, in that interview clip we played, said we have to build for ourselves and not get distracted by Hayakawa. And Hayakawa represents whiteness. Now, I'm only saying that as a backdrop. I just want to ask you this question before you go on, because I know you're about to make a point. Given that this is a social structure publisher, I'm assuming that Nule Rooks, who comes out of the Black tradition, out of the Bay Area, including the Bay Area, may have started with Ms. Bethune herself. But I'm wondering if an editor, or even if Nule decided she wanted to do this herself, as a point of entry, started with who we are to other people. This is not an Africana studies text. In other words, you are so I'm saying the promise of Black studies, which was us with ourselves, that book writing about an institution builder, it's about, why don't you say the name of the book could be Eleanor Roosevelt, Mary McLeod Bethune's friend? Because you started anyway. So I'm asking you as an editor, could the editor have intervened? Did the author make a choice? I'm asking you as a not only a well-established, but a huge presence in the publishing world and as a writer, what kind of choices were made that had you write 2 pages before you get to the subject of the book? Bull Connor before Mary McLeod Bethune. I'm just asking.
5 years ago.
Okay.
I might have
talk to us.
I might have been in alignment with this particular writing because, to your point, you're writing a book to go out to the mainstream, whatever that means in 20 whatever when this book was written. Mm-hmm. You're writing for a mainstream audience that you want to pick up this book. You're not writing to just Black people. This is the way it would have been framed in my head, right? As a publisher. As a matter of fact, I just I published a book. I'm laughing, and I'm not going to talk about this maybe publicly, but I'm doing something strategic because I want to see something, right? Because now you got me, you have me stressing a lot of things that I know what I know, even about how to produce media, how to produce, what sells, what doesn't. Listen, I have 8 New York Times bestsellers. I know what sells.
No question.
Okay.
This is why I'm asking you. Parenthetically, as a footnote, can you predict whether or not this book's going to sell?
It's not going to
sell. Exactly, like any other academic book.
Right,
Only like us read them kind of books. But go ahead. All right.
I mean, it might sell because we're talking about it, but
library subscriptions and academics, sure. But anyway, go ahead.
But this was the question that I asked myself this week as I was laughing at what I'm doing, because sometimes you have to poke your finger in the face. As every Black book that I own has come through a mainstream white publisher. Like that's not true because I have a bunch of third world and Black. I'm talking about Toni Morrison, even my brother Kwame Alexander. All of these books that are like popping,
And shout out to Walter
Harriet, like that's a white publisher.
Well, Walter Mosley and Paul Coates are like this, and Walter Mosley deliberately made them give Paul Gone Fishing. Right. And Paul said, I learned more in that experience because the scale, the work. I mean, he said, man, it almost killed us. But I was so grateful to Walter because he showed us the other thing. But that was a deliberate choice. It was Walter Mosley, who's a beast. He forced them. He said, now get us to Black Classic Press. So to your point, can Black presses even hold the weight on those kind of books?
Yes, but we have to be institution builders, which
come on now
requires something else. So like, listen, I'm pressing and making some things, doing some things to see what the possibilities are, because moving forward, like even I just said Michael Harriet or Clay Kane, the Griff, all of these are mainstream publishers, and I'm not disparaging the books at all. But to say Euro, yes, let me stop saying that. Even the language,
mainstream. I'm mainstream. Damn about them publishers.
Yeah, but see how that is, how that just rolled off my tongue because of how
all of our tongues.
So I'm saying
that kiss the hand of the mainstream. Shout out to Billy Porter. The point is that we the mainstream. Anyway, we'll go ahead.
I'm saying that we have to start to examine all of the things that we think and
Facts.
believe
Facts.
and think we know, and start to put it back together, rip it apart, which is what we've done, I think, here, kind of, quietly, masterfully, kind of rip the thing apart. But also, like, the first thing I did was turn the book over to see, who's, and then I saw the name and I was like, okay, so I'm coming in with a different, because I wouldn't have done that normally. Nobody looks at the publisher. Nobody really looks at who's editing. Nobody looks at that. They're like, oh, Mary McLeod Bethune. Okay, this is good. Let me, and you get in and you start reading. And I immediately was like, wow, they had a whole conference. So this is where I'm a pick through. I'm gonna pick through to find the gems.
This is the I'm trying to remember. I think this is the conference where Connor threatened to arrest her if she sat on the black side. And he wanted her to go to the white side in the hall, and she ended up sitting in the aisle in the middle.
She being Eleanor Roosevelt.
Roosevelt, because that's what the book's about, right?
But here's
anyway,
the thing. Here's the thing. To not even know that there was a conference. I didn't even.
Oh, sure.
I didn't consider what you were saying, because I was like, I didn't know there was a conference. I didn't know that Eleanor Roosevelt was at a conference where Bull Connor was going to arrest her. I didn't know these things. I didn't know they had a whole agenda looking at the very things that we still talk about. So now I'm going down a rabbit hole of real research, to find out, okay, what did come of this, right?
What year was that?
1938.
38.
So we looking in Germany. The Holocaust is starting.
You got the index? Did you see the index? Is the index in that book?
I didn't get that far.
It's got to be an index.
Yes, there's an extensive index.
If you look up and see if they have either A. Philip Randolph or Howard University. I'm sure she did it. She did write about that. Because remember, we talked about this maybe in our first year when A. Philip Randolph called off the march in 43, and Arnold Hedgeman, of course, involved in that. And the sisters, wait, Randolph's not in there?
Well, it's not in the A, so let me go to the R's.
Yeah, I'm assuming.
Let me do it that way. Yeah, because that makes sense. No. Yes, he is. Page 93, 94 to 95. So he's in.
See what it says. Do you see Hedgeman before you go to the see if you see Hedgeman? Because again, it's a black woman writing about another black woman. I'm assuming that the black woman who was the left and right arms of A. Philip Randolph in planning the March on Washington, which Randolph called off, and the sisters came to DC anyway at Howard and had a whole conference. Okay, and Arnold Hedgeman remains invisible. Okay, very good. Do you mind? I'm just come on, y'all.
You asked about Howard. Howard.
Yeah, where's Howard? Where are the numbers for Howard?
Howard D. Woodson High School Choir of Washington, D.C. Houston, Hoover, Hughes, Langston.
No Howard University.
No Howard. Lincoln University.
No, but the conference was at Howard. Very interesting. Can you go? You say page 93? It's in the
93 is A. Philip Randolph. And this is instructive too, because I just read. I open and crack.
Of course.
No, but I'm saying, like, we are, to me, this is instruction that is invaluable. I don't know where else you would get this unless it was in a classroom, and I doubt that many professors even will take you through this. All right, 93. A. Philip Randolph, Bethune, and Terrell. Oh, well, Terrell's there.
Yeah, because she was in DC. Okay.
Terrell, under Terrell's leadership, the NACW sought to show the masses, she put that in quotes, of Black women the behaviors and attitudes in need of embracing if they wish to enhance their lives.
Yeah, I'm assuming that they were Black women, but that they wanted the Black community to see the values. But anyway, I'm going to leave that intersection.
Right. Listen, editor, let me finish reading.
No, I'm saying, because again, this is the stuff that messes us up. But let's continue. So let's see what they said.
For her part, Bethune believed the organization should go beyond individual focused projects organized along the general lines of quote unquote self-help, and take a page from the political work that organizations like A. Philip Randolph's Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters were doing to join national efforts to organize the working class. She wanted to advocate, blah, blah, blah. And so that's the first mention. And then it was like 94 to 95. W. Du Bois is in there. Okay, hold on.
By the way,
Bayard Rustin. Okay, all right. As a true As was true of other leaders like Paul Robeson, Bayard Rustin, A. Philip Randolph, and W.B. Du Bois, Bethune insisted on seeing the whole field as she strove to push American democracy to live up to its principles, not only in theory, but in practice. And Terrell disagreed. And that's the only mention. That's it.
All right. Now, I'm wondering why. What were those names again?
No, A. Philip Randolph,
who was married? Who was
Du Bois?
Du Bois, Shirley Graham Du Bois. Go on.
Bayard Rustin.
Bayard Rustin. Okay, he's out there. He's an outlier.
Paul Robeson, Bayard Rustin, and
where's Essie?
She's not in here.
Okay, this is what I'm saying. The language choices themselves bake in a certain sensibility. Even to say that Ms. Bethune was doing that to perfect democracy, yeah, as a means to an end, and to say A. Philip Randolph's Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, which of course X's out the Women's Auxiliary of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters and Chambermaids, and also, I'm not saying, and Anna Arnold Hedgeman remains unvoiced. This is the big. If you take Ms. Bethune, look. Anytime you mention Mary Bethune, Mary Church Terrell, you should be right along in the same breath. Don't take another breath. Anna Arnold Hedgeman, you gotta. But we talked about this.
Anyway, so let me ask you this, because this is what I've assessed. Even talking with Ibram Kendi this week.
Yeah, how'd that go? I listened, but I don't want to. A lot of people may not have Sirius yet, and y'all should subscribe because it's $1
for 3 months, y'all. Get Sirius XM. Stop playing in our face. Stop playing it. First of all, Dr. Carr and Lamont on Fridays, 7 to 10. Listen, some of the best radio I've heard in a long time. I appreciate y'all. I'm hyperbolic, but yes, no, it is pretty good. It's pretty good. I'm just gonna say
hyperbole is segregating segregating gender when you talking about Mary Bethune, who didn't do that anyway. Ask Howard Thurman about Mary Bethune. But yeah, so yeah, no, it ain't hyperbole.
It's good. Just stop being modest. That show is fire. So is mine.
You're a genius for putting us together.
I'm not a genius. I'm not a genius.
Yes, you are. That's not hyperbole either. Look, what are the chances of Arthur Fletcher's son calling up on a Friday morning and saying, "I want to talk about Black Republicans"? There's no precedent for that. I was sitting there like, "Are you serious right now?"
But the power is in us, right? So
it's in us.
It doesn't take a genius to realize that people who have particular skills and talent should be heard. That's not genius. That's not genius. That's like
it takes vision, because the stuff that's being unearthed. We started the first show on Paper Boys, and next thing you know, Lamont didn't know his whole life. His daddy delivered Chancellor Williams' paper in D.C. I said, "Are you serious right now?" His father told him that this week. You have to be able to see how. Let me put this: vision is 50. That's 1,000% of the thing. Nathan here had vision. You got vision. I'm just saying. Just you sit with. You got to sit with it.
Yes, I do. I do see things.
Yeah, you see things.
But I walk and think and talk and to myself and out into the void. And I talk to you and I talk to everybody who has a brain in my life. And I'm constantly challenging and questioning. So I arrived at this thing. First of all, that this book was written in earnest. I don't think this woman is not
without a doubt.
Yeah, so this is what I'm saying. So we have to start there. We have to start. This book was written with the thought that I am doing something good.
No question.
Okay, so
1,000%, no question.
And as somebody, again, as I said, 5 years ago, I might have approached this differently. 5 years ago, this whole thing would be different. But
the first thing they say to me is, "Where is your book?" And my answer, of course, is, "I'm teaching your children, the ones who I signed the books. Okay. Y'all don't teach." So anyway, I mean, and when I'm very clear, y'all don't teach. Your TAs teach. I literally teach my classes. And also the second part of the answer is woe unto the day when my book comes, because when it does come, it's going to be a lot of crying. And believe me, there are a lot of words floating around that are on pages now. So that awful day will surely come for you. But yes, that is it's an earnest effort.
Okay.
It's an earnest effort. Right?
I feel like yes, it's an earnest effort. Man, okay, what are we talking about today?
No. We let me see. Now, Leeway wrote a book. I don't have it. Let me see if I see it. It used to be over here, because I was looking over here, hoping, and she did evade my vision. The shelf of books on Mary McLeod Bethune, McCluskey's edited volumes, which have her actual words. The other books, her own words. I mean, the children's books, and I'm sure all those are referred to in the bibliography. But I'm also now looking. Oh, I almost think I saw it. No, maybe White Power, Black Studies, I think is the name of Naliwe's book on the Ford Foundation, how they funded Black Studies programs. So she's done a lot of work on the history of Black Studies. She has taught in Black Studies programs. She's in one now. Like I said, she was at Cornell, I think. I forget where she is now, maybe Princeton. But none of them are Africana Studies programs as far as I'm concerned. They're certainly not what Nathan Hare was talking about. And so the evasion of what Nathan Hare and Julia Hare and James Turner, who Noliwe was at Cornell, all of that has been completely evaded. Now everybody's in Africana Studies. Every day, I'm in Africana Studies, I'm in Black Studies. You're not. Because the whole purpose of Black Studies, what Nathan Hare was talking about.
Okay.
And see,
before we get into him, I just want to just say, lay the foundation. Everything that's out there, even I think maybe Skip Gates came in thinking he was doing something, you know, like, and then a funny thing happens, you know, when Fame, and because I watch Ibram, you know, as I'm asking him questions, like in his mind kind of navigate, because no one is equipped to ask those questions. No one's asking those questions of the people as they present these things, right?
You are.
And I am, but I'm not, I don't have, you know.
Wait, you on what?
The way the thing, the machine,
sit with us Juneteenth weekend. You freeing us. Juneteenth wasn't never for everybody. Didn't you say this week, I did not want Juneteenth to be a federal holiday?
Yes, I was even thinking about how I was taking off.
Talk
and
to
then
me.
I told my team, I was like, we should play Eye on the Prize for 3 hours.
Talk to it.
Yeah, so I didn't plan it out though. Next year we're gonna do that though. We taking off. It might be just silence. I was like, can we just have silence on Urban View for the whole show? Like that would be radical. So I'm planning something for next year, because this is some bull.
That's radical. Because I thought you said it's a sin to have dead air.
It is. So
but that would be living air. You would have living air.
And that's what freedom looks like. We're going to do whatever we do. But, you know, again,
I love it. Hey, y'all, this is how Juneteenth. And by the way, if y'all want to go back and look at the history of Juneteenth, that is episodes 1367, 119, and 171. You know, I went back and looked. We got an archive. We got 4 years of talking in great detail about F.W. Embry and General Order Number 3 and Galveston. It's all there. Just want to put that in. We might some of that today a little bit, but not really. We got 4 years. It's our 5th time. You got an archive. But what we just hearing now is the result of that momentum. Man, can you imagine that? That's vision. See?
Yeah, no, immediately it was like, why are we even working, doing anything? Like, let's just, the day of absence needs to happen for real.
Douglas Turner Ward.
Yeah. So I
read in jail in the prison and said, oh, I want to be an actor. He read Douglas Turner Ward's Day of Absence. What happened if Black people just said, we're not participating? We're not publishing a book on an institution builder with another white press. We're just not, even though I'm sincere. Anyway, we're not going, that's cool. Because Miss Bethune took white money. She got that money from, what's the boy that owned the Montgomery Ward? That's what she bought the house. But then you take that money and you build an institution. You don't take the money so you can get an appointment. Mary McLeod Bethune is not a DEI figure. But, you know, I guess Eleanor Roosevelt and Bull Connor might just, well, I'm not sure.
Let's not, but this sister, if she's listening today, may feel attacked.
That's my friend. I'm not mad at her.
That's not your friend. If saying
no. When I say that, when I'm saying, let me be very clear about this. If you want to operate in these white spaces, you can't do other than what is being done. In other words, that's not an outlier. And if you want to work in these Black academic spaces that aspire to whiteness, that's why Nathan Hare got fired at Howard. He got let go. People say, oh, San Francisco State first Black Studies program. Yeah, never forget, Nathan Hare, he's writing in the student newspaper at Howard almost every semester. They said they wanted Howard to be 60% white by a target date. Nathan Hare, an assistant professor with a 1-year contract, writes and says, y'all crazy. And they let him go. But Nathan Hare, after he left Howard, he didn't have a job. Nathan Hare was a boxer. He went pro and boxed. He said, I'll fight before. And there's this, and I want you to continue. Very quickly, 30 seconds. He had a metaphor of cotton. You would see him say, I was the fastest cotton picker in Oklahoma. I can always pick cotton. He said that when they let him go at Howard. When he was in San Francisco State, so what you gonna do? He said, I can always pick cotton. In other words, what I'm not gonna do, I'm not coming with y'all. He went and got a second PhD, became a clinical psychologist, opened up a practice rather than go back in that academy, because he knew when you go back in there, this is what it is. Well-intentioned, brilliant people who have to turn themselves inside out. And that I understand. The problem I have is when they believe it. I'm not sure Kendi believes it. What you think? Because you talk with him.
Yeah, no, it's hard not to, right? So if the pathway to success and relevance is there, it's never been here. Why would you go here? There is where you're supposed to go, right? So they have the advance, they have the machine, the distribution, the channels, the levers of power to push, like the music industry, right? So the music industry created Billboard magazine. We're going to push out a record, and then we're going to put it on the charts and tell everybody it's number one. And then we also control the media that then reports on what Billboard just said is number one. Then we're going to have all of this. And now the music is on a loop. Now today they're going to do different things like this, the song that they keep playing on Instagram. I'm not even going to talk about it, but you know, it's just like, this is how you get us. And it's hard to break. And so I'm testing to see what would happen if we reverse this. Like, how do we reverse this? So that's why I'm dismantling and then coming back and putting something different to create the appetite for everyone to want to buy amazing books from amazing publishers who center us. So there's going to be a narrative imprint. There's going to be a narrative imprint that centers us. Yeah, no, there has to be, right? So, you know, and, you know, Dr. Carr is going to be probably, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
I'm telling you, that awful day is coming. So,
yeah,
don't
you
claim
know,
that y'all didn't know.
But we have to build equal and opposite, but better and opposite. But also, like, damn, there's a whole library at Alexandria that's better than any library that's ever. Africa's had the best libraries ever.
After created the per ankh.
That's what I'm.
Why Yiquar calls his publishing per ankh, House of Light. That's what they call their libraries. Per Majat, House of Books. There were no libraries in Europe.
So to my point, I'm not following the Simon and Schuster model, even though what Richard Simon and them, what they did was amazing. But I always say to people, they did that with nothing. So why do we need to go chase the check when the things that you're chasing started with nothing? Hermes, I just talked about Hermes, billions of dollars being left to some gardener from a legacy that was built with, you know, doing stuff for rich people's horses, you know, and then that turned into handbags. Everything started with nothing. And usually it started with Black ingenuity, as we'll find Movie Pass, all of this stuff. It's usually our creativity that somebody else goes, oh, that's really great. Let's put a system behind it and let's then push it out so we have money forever. You know, whether it's music, whether it's art, movies, or whatever. So why can't we start publishing from the beginning and going back to the way it was and then coming forward with it and not modeling it after Penguin and Random and all? Like, we don't have to model after them. We got our own models.
We have our own models, but they require our participation, which is why, you know, as I always ask, you know, when we say they not like us, I'm like, who is they and who is us? Because it seems to me that unless that Kendrick Drake battle was done by Black institutions, they made a lot of money. So if you to us, then you are they. And in this sense, what you talking about, yeah, they, and I would include these two rappers and everybody else, 50, Sean Carter, who doesn't perform unless, you know, the people he aspires to says, damn. Anyway.
Wait. So you saw him show up for Tom Brady and the white folk were like, who is this N-word?
Because they not like us. The us there is the people who run it, which is the point you're making. I mean, this is why when we do our ways of knowing category, when we did the first iteration of African States class, we read Jacob and discussed Jacob Carruthers' Science and Oppression. Ordinal classifications, meaning you set up a structure, you then impose that structure on other people, and once people accept it, they're trapped. Billboard has a ranking. So what? We got a ranking too. And so it's like, and people say, we got the BET Awards, we got the Image Awards. No, you don't. That's blackface ordinal classifications, because the same thing showing up on their list is showing up on the white list. Why? Because it's being driven by money, not power. Power can be money. Power can be people. We got more people than money. We could do whatever we want. So, I mean, you know, I'm sure that all those books are going to be submitted for Image Awards. They're going to be submitted for, and you've done this. You've done a lot more of it than I have. Anybody who has ever received books for an award, first of all, they send you the books. Meaning what? They've already shrunk your field. Now, I haven't done a lot of that, but when I do get lots, this is what will happen with me. Because I buy the books. See, I opted out of that whole ecosystem and have. That's why, you know, I made certain choices because I know once you in the show, it's hard. So this is what happens with me. I get calls or emails or texts from my friends who are on those committees, and they'll say, which of these books should I pick? Because they don't read them. You know how that works. And I say to them, is such and such on the list? No. Is such and such on the list? No. After I look at the list, knowing that these books aren't. And I say, well, of these remaining books, you might well just pick the one you like with the nice cover or the title, because the books that should be on this list ain't on this list. That's how you know. And I'm saying books that were published in the same year. Now, like somebody like Gerald Horne, his books are almost never on the list. They've been forced on the list now, not because of money, but because of people. In other words, once enough people start doing something, what do you say? That's when they chase it. That's the algorithm method. You know, that's, you know, I mean, you know, how did this become popular? Once we saw that everybody was up downloading this on TikTok or dancing this, that's when we reached out. That's how they can destroy institutions. There's no Motown. There's not going to be any stacks. There's going to be any. Why? Because no, we'll just sit back, see which one y'all watching, and then we'll snatch Lil Nas X out of the fan club world and then put Old Town Road on. Let's see if he does it again or he won't do it again. Where's Lil Nas X today? I'm looking, where's his last, you know, what? You ain't got no institution. You're a one-hit, two-hit wonder. You see what I'm saying? So, I mean, what you're saying is so important. Without institutions, you become part of an ordinal classification. They put it on loop. Well, like me and Lamont were talking about Thursday's New York Times, gluttony of media consumptions creates what these scientists are now calling this brain rot. And if you're writing a book, an academic book that you know is not going to be popular, but you're trying to write it in a little bit of a prose sense that people will begin to warm to it, which means you try to craft prose that is a gesture towards cinematic. I won't even say cinematic because it ain't movies no more. TV episode. So you're trying to paint a picture. Here's Eleanor Roosevelt. Here's Bull Connor. Your editor probably told you, I don't know, you know, you need to capture the people and pull it in. Mary Bethune is not capturable enough. Why? Because you need an audience beyond Black people. But here's the tragedy. Black people ain't gonna read about Mary McLeod Bethune. They may watch a TikTok video or some floating head with Mary McLeod Bethune in the back, and then Miss Bethune, boom, boom, boom. Or they might do a cartoon, or maybe if you do a what's that little cartoon now, Sophie or Claire with, and have Miss Bethune dancing a little bit, you might be able to catch it. But my point is this: in that world, that book will garner professional notice. It may grant professional awards. You might get an award from the Professional Association, this kind of thing. And that's going to have to be enough. Now, if you were freed of all that and you come to Knarrative imprint, if you come to a Black space, I promise you, Noliwe Rooks writes a different book.
Yes.
I'm telling you, she writes a different book if she publishes you know?
And we also, and I'm very transparent because I need this to not be a special thing. You know, that's why I reject the whole notion of genius or whatever, because everyone needs their imagination awakened. And everyone needs to imagine a world where there is no chasing of acceptance outside of ourselves, that we are enough, right? Everybody needs to imagine that. So if I'm talking about building something, everyone listening, if you have it in you to build something, build it and build it well, right? Somebody said Ta-Nehisi didn't publish with his dad. He didn't. Neither did Kwame Alexander. Do you know what I'm saying? Because there are limitations, and Paul talks about this. I've talked with him, so it's no knock on Ta-Nehisi, because Paul will say,
without getting too deep into it, please
I don't have
people understand. Please help people understand That's not Ta-Nehisi's choice. Paul knows. Help me, because
Right. I mean,
y'all talking.
Listen, I talked to Paul about
Yeah.
collaborating. That was the first place I went, because
Yes,
who
ma'am.
wants to do a thing? You know, it's hard. It's hard, but it's not just hard. There is so much that goes into this. But
Yes.
all I know is that that's 100 years of institution building.
Yes.
And while, you know, I got breath in my body, I'm going to, you know, start it, pick up the baton. Let's create it so that 50 years from now, there's a representative that is bigger, better, badder than whatever's out there now, centering Black people.
Right.
We should have that, right? But it requires something. So it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of energy. And Paul's like, this is not my ministry right now. I'm gonna do what I do. I'm gonna stay in my lane. So if it's gonna be something bigger, it's gonna require something more. So we're gonna just build it so Ta-Nehisi can have other options if he chooses. Now, if he chooses after we have the thing that is equal to that,
and here's
we're gonna have a conversation with him.
Well, and here's what we've been doing. Here's what, thanks to you, we got this space. If anyone makes that choice, set aside any particular names, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Ibram Kendi, doesn't matter. Everybody gets in. See, the challenge with it is, well, we know this. In those white spaces, it's a pick-me space. In other words, this isn't a critique of the man known as Lil Nas X. This is a person who wants to be famous, who wants to be seen, which is why I completely reject the phraseology, I feel seen. He's like, what are you doing? You're giving your agency out to something outside of yourself. But anyway, it's a pick-me culture. Pick me, pick me, pick me. But once you're in a space, in a governance space with all of us, two things happen. Foundationally, we are all valuable. That erases, to the point you're raising around words like genius and things that erases the idea that who we are isn't enough. People say that all the time, but you don't mean that. You're saying that because you're trying to do a self-help book, or that's the first thing. The second thing is that in that space where we all have a fundamental human value, whatever gifts you have, whatever aspirations you have, will be nurtured by the collective and demonstrated. So someone who these white spaces have identified as geniuses, in our spaces, they are valuable as humans, but there's somebody who Barack Obama's the best example I can think of. Anytime white people say he's a gifted orator, I say, clearly you've never been to a Black church. In other words, you picked him and you say he's brilliant. Yeah, put him in the oratory contest with 30 other Black people at the Missionary Baptist Church. Maybe he places, probably doesn't. Because ain't nobody trying to hear, and it's not a Black or white, it's the United States of America. Dude, really? Put that up against They Not Like Us, the speech that Daniel Omatosho Black gave. You don't even rank. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, but in the white space, you ain't never going to let Dan Black come up and say, no, you ain't never going to come and allow him to do that.
Church finger, I'm out. Go on, let's bring us home. Bring us home.
No, but in that space, I mean, today we opened this Juneteenth weekend, and again, for those who are new to the space, and for those who are not new, who've been, with us for years now, who were here before there was a narrative in the Nubia, when we were only on YouTube, who now, for those of you who will be listening to this on other platforms, on Spotify, or Apple, or wherever you hear our voices, understand that this being Juneteenth weekend, which on the 15th of June, Saturday the 15th of June, would be appropriate in the historical arc of what became Juneteenth, because it's called Teenth because the 19th ain't the day. That's the day that F.W. Embry, one of General Gordon Granger's lieutenants there in Galveston Bay, coming on shore and reading the General Order number 3, after General Orders number 1 and 2, declaring that the Confederates lost, the war is over, getting to General Order 3, saying that all slaves are free. I'm using the word slaves because that's the word that was used in the General Order, and that the Negro is supposed to stay in his place and work for wages, as if wages were just going to appear somewhere. Still waiting on that, by the way, in one form or another. But you know that the 19th of June is a signifier for the length of time it took for that news to reach the rest of the country, the surrender at Appomattox and the end of the Civil War, which didn't end, by the way, as we remember, as we talked about in previous iterations of this, previous Junes. As Gerald writes, Horn in the Counter-Revolution of 1836, he writes about the fact that, by the way, this book is published by international publishers out of New York. International publishers out of New York. International publishers out of New York. That's a left press. That's them communists, you see. Not going to win any awards. Not going to win any awards, even though it clocks in at 622 pages and is meticulously researched and talks about that racist country called Texas. Anybody living in Texas ain't got know anything about that. But if you want to read about Juneteenth in a very important and useful way, you can go to chapter 18, page 429, which begins called Juneteenth Emancipation. You see Juneteenth, and you see my marginalia there. I'm always writing in these books. And see how he starts this chapter? The African, known as Lou Lee, was once enslaved in Texas. That's the first sentence. Subsequently, he recalled that, quote, Master Wash Ingram had 350 slaves when the war was over, but he didn't turn us loose till a year after surrender, end quote, with a footnote for those who want to check that research. Gerald writes, the experience was not unique. The scholar Robert Walter Shook wrote that by late 1865, quote, Negroes were reportedly in virtual slavery in the region between the Neches and the Sabine as far north as Henderson, end quote. By the summer of 1866, Brevet Major General C.C. Andrews held the, quote, opinion that the reestablishment of slavery was imminent, end quote, while John T. Allen asserted that, quote, secessionists still held Negroes in bondage, hoping for compensation, end quote. Won't go on with that. Just to make the point that Juneteenth wasn't the end of enslavement. We hadn't even gotten to Reconstruction. And then redemption, which is white supremacy taking over. This is the pattern, by the way, of the criminal enterprise known as United States of America. Victory, fight back, victory. Victory, I mean, for African people. Fight back, meaning whiteness reasserts itself. That is what we've been on the long arc in the nearly 60 years since the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, 60th anniversary this year. We're passing it, coming up on passing it. And that's why you see wholly owned subsidiaries of billionaires like Clarence Thomas Crowe coming in, not Jim Crow, Harlan Crow, who wrote the majority opinion in the bump stock case yesterday. We'll get to that. And I love Sonia Sotomayor is out there fighting with both fists. Her opening paragraph on her dissent in the machine gun case was brilliant. We'll get to that in a minute. But it's the white lash. This is the pattern. So June 19th, 1865 did not signal the end of enslavement, not even literal physical enslavement, as Gerald is writing in chapter 18 of the Counter-Revolution of 1836. It went on for a year or more. You look at Doug Edgerton's book, Slavery by Another Name, you'll see that it continued up into the 20th century. We haven't even gotten to Reconstruction, the end of Reconstruction, then the creation of Jim Crow laws and all that. What Carter G. Woodson, born in 1875 in Virginia, refers to in The Miseducation of the Negro, as we read in Nubia and went page by page, the sequel to slavery. It has sequels and afterlives. By the way, those who believe in a blackface nativist lineage-based reparations theory, it's not going to be solved by trying to prove somehow that you're a descendant from those who were enslaved. Because see, the sequel to enslavement is founded in the same thing that enslavement, that oppression was founded in, and that is white supremacy. And white supremacy is no respecter of where you came out of your mother's womb. Your last name could be Fubara or Carr. Your last name could be Clark coming out of the Caribbean, or Bachwe Asmoa coming out of Ghana. It's your race that's going to determine how you are treated in this society. The lineage-based case, I'm not going to get into that because that's not what I'm here to talk about today, although I may come back to it in a minute. The point I was trying to make is, and I'll continue with this, is that self-determination standing in the institutions you build, standing in collectives with each other and those who will come and recognize their common humanity and common cause with you. That's what allows society to improve. Not trying to worm your way in and whisper sweet nothings into the ear of a hierarchical system that has its foot on your neck in the hope that somehow somebody will release perhaps the baby toe on one of the feet and give you a little bit of pressure off. And worse still, you find out after you've done that for 30, 40, 50 years that you have become the foot on the neck of the very people you claim to be working for. That's what happens when you integrate into an oppressive system, as opposed to reconstruct the system by building your own systems, which is why when Gerald writes this book, he starts his book with this independent publisher, this radical publisher introduction title, Where the Old South Meets the Wild West. This is the first sentence of the Counter-Revolution of 1836. In 1859, Texas was a bleeding sore. I'll stop there. The point is that when you control your thing, you do what you want. Oh, look at that. I had it right next to Ptahhotep. The Teachings of Ptahhotep, independently published. Shout out to Mama Nia Damali, who published this originally in 1987, along with Asa Hilliard and Larry Obadele Williams. It's very important. This is independently published, Blackwood Press and Company, Atlanta, Georgia. And y'all get by Mama Nia's shop down there in Medu in Atlanta. Pick up a copy of The Teachings of Ptahhotep and everything else. Look who she dedicates the book to. Look at these black people publishing a black press with the words of ancient Egyptian, what's called the oldest book in the world, translated here. Who's it dedicated to? This is what happens when you own your own. This book is dedicated to the numerous African scribes who labored for generations to instill in African peoples the ancient Kemetic teaching of the mysteries. Man, know thyself. Now that's a riff on George G.M. James, George Granville Mona James, who published along with a black published press. And of course, you see Julian Richardson out there in the Bay Area, by the way, not too far from where Nathan Hare and Julia Hare did their work for decades. Marcus Books out there published Stolen Legacy, republished Stolen Legacy, originally published in 1954. I wouldn't say man know thyself, because the Egyptians in terms of gender wouldn't have used that language, but we get there, we'll get there. And for all the people who use Hotep as a pejorative, you've opened your mouth and your brain is on display. Hotep, of course, as we know in this space, and as we know from sitting with and learning from all of our teachers of meta nature in Nubia and narrative, we have Dr. Mario Beatty as fine a teacher of meta nature as there is, who draws breath in this common world. Think about Riketi Amen, thinking about Benachi Montgomery, who will be with us in Kemet, thinking about a couple of our continental African fam are coming with us to the Nile Valley in August. So we'll be talking about the language again in a way that is accessible to everyone. But we know that word Hotep not only means peace, it can mean different things in different contexts. So when somebody calls somebody a Hotep, what you're basically saying is that you've been assaulted. You're a victim of assault. You're a victim of intellectual assault. And the people who you're aiming that word at, who definitely need to be analyzed, critiqued, and helped, who have taken that word and affiliated it with all kind of problematic language and behavior, those two are victims of assault. So anyway, I just brought it because it was right next to Gerald's book, another press that ain't owned by people that make you torture your language. But anyway, I'm raising all that to say that was kind of a long footnote to the point I wanted to make, which is, if you want to go into the archive on this Juneteenth weekend, the spirit of which has permeated our first steps today, the archive is available. And we go into great detail with a number of comments and commentary on Juneteenth. I didn't have this one. I didn't have this when we did session number 13 in 2020. Number 13 in 2020, because we started that spring and we were only 3 months in. That's when I had the Frederick Douglass afro. was
And
trapped
you ain't
inside.
know what this was then. You ain't know. So what is that book? Hold that up. And where did
I'm about to
where'd
show
you,
it to you because
where'd you get it? Where'd you get it?
we didn't have this in 1367, 119, or 171. Those are the sessions where we talked about Juneteenth. But we have it today because as I was moving stuff, I found it. So let me put this up so I can show it to everybody. This is a little pamphlet called Juneteenth. This is J. Mason Brewer. I would encourage people to look this brother up. J. Mason Brewer. This is a reprint from something called Publications of the Texas Folklore Society, number 10, 1932. This is actually a copy that I picked up in a used bookstore many years ago for, and I don't see the price. I mean, it's not priced here. Typically, when something like this is not priced in a used bookstore, they get you for $1.50. It's priceless to me, of course, because it's signed by J. Mason Brewer. But anyway, the point is J. Mason Brewer is one of the great, to use our Africana Studies framework, and I have to keep coming back to that framework because this is what guides everything else. Pause here for a second. And again, lifting up the name of someone we'll be talking about in a minute, the great Nathan Hare. Nathan Hare didn't have a middle name. Nathaniel was his original name. He changed it to Nathan because he preferred it shorter than other people. He said, you know, these teachers always want to give me a middle name, but my mom was like, no, he don't have no middle name, and I have nothing. But Nathan Hare articulated a vision of what they called Black studies in the 1960s that we have to be true to. Talking about Black people is not Black studies. Investigating little interesting stories about Black people and then theorizing them for approval by your dissertation committee or your academic publisher is not Black studies. Thinking work leading to practice, leading to liberation is Black studies, Africana studies. That's what it is. So in that tradition and in that genealogy, in that lineage, in that whole line, I have to always remind us and remind myself to use that Africana studies framework because it is designed to require us to answer that seventh question that you, Professor Hunter, elevated into that space and said, this must be our guiding piece. How do it free us? How do it free us? Quoting, of course, Sonia Sanchez. So, who, by the way, I should reach out to and offer condolences because when Nathan Hare took that program, established that program, very shortly thereafter, Sonia Sanchez was one of the professors that went out there to teach in California at San Francisco State in that Africana Studies, Black Studies program. Nathan Hare also, by the way, was one of the guiding lights to say, we'll call the broader concept, when you start talking about other non-white groups, Latinos or what would be called probably Chicanos out there on the West Coast with the Mexican, with the indigenous people there who congeal there, Asian. So instead of calling them these lines, we'll put in whole cluster, y'all call them minorities. So Hare and them were like, no, we're going to call it ethnic studies, which is a step removed and better, although ethnic comes from the Greek ethne, which means other, literally other. It's also the root of the word heathen, but that's a story for another day. At least ethnic ain't minority, because we're not a minority, as Professor, I know you remind us all the time, we're the global majority, in fact. But this pamphlet, Juneteenth by J. Mason Brewer, is a collection of stories, a collection of movement and memory and cultural meaning making. Cultural meaning making in our African Studies framework is the category that asks, in any given moment in time, how did or do African people mark that moment in time? So here in 2024, the summer of 2024, fast approaching, the solstice is coming up next week. You got children. I saw a few social media clips being shared of little children who know every word of "they not like us, they not like us." That's cultural meaning making. In their moment in time, that's what it's going to be, marked right there. Now, in terms of movement and memory, that category asks, how did or do African people remember experiences, remember events, remember figures as they move across time and space, which is why this week, as we saw earlier this week, released by National Public Radio in a space that some of you all have probably been in. I've been in myself to visit, although sadly never for a concert. I wish I could have seen my man, the great musician, Black American music is what he would call it, not jazz or anything else, the great Nicholas Payton out of New Orleans, when he performed at the NPR, what they call the Tiny Desk. And he opened, it's quite striking for me and very, very humbling for me to hear when I go on the album, Afro-Caribbean Mixtape, or look on YouTube or the video where NPR, Tiny Desk, here's the great Nicholas Payton, son of New Orleans, son of Africa, son of Congo Square, the next iteration coming after the cats like his comrade Roy Eldridge, his comrade Roy Hargrove, rather. And then before that, certainly Roy Eldridge, the trumpeter, and of course, the granddaddy of them all coming out of New Orleans, and that would of course be Louis Armstrong, Pops, whose birthday is coming up, by the way, this summer. But to see Nick Payton at the Tiny Desk with his band crowded behind that little bench there. And if you ever get a chance to tour NPR and you can see the Tiny Desk, it's tiny. But I'm saying Tiny Desk probably goes from where y'all see me right now, right to not too far where those bookshelves are. And then behind, it ain't that much room. You got a little bit of back end room. And then in front, it's it's an office. It's literally a Tiny Desk at an office crammed with stuff. But to hear Nick Payton and to see that video and to see the little drawing of the microphone in NPR, it says Tiny Desk, and the music already started, to hear, wow, I know that song. He started with that song. I wish I could have been there that day, because years ago, Nick Payton reached out to me and said, I saw a talk you gave on Carter G. Woodson on YouTube. It's still floating out there. I was a lot younger, for the school district of Philadelphia, when we were developing the conceptual categories. And I said, yeah, man. He said, I want to use some of that sound in something I'm working on. I said, oh, bro, of course. First of all, it's an honor to be reached out to by the great Nicholas Payton. You the man, of course, brother, because you're carrying the genealogy. He's he's an astute son of that genealogy, movement and memory. But he's also, in terms of cultural meaning making, putting his own stamp. Movement and memory don't mean you repeat the thing in the past word for word, unless you're trying to do that. It also means you put your own thing on it. And I've seen Nick Payton do that. If you go back into our archive, you can see us discussing that. He was at the Kennedy Center doing a thing on Louis Armstrong and composed a whole new suite of stuff. He integrates DJs. He's got electronic devices, but he plays all these instruments. So he's got his horn at the center of it. So he does this. He said, I want to use some sound from you. I said, sure. And then I ain't hear from Nick again. Next thing you know, he says, oh, the album is out. The album? Yeah. And oh, by the way, Nicholas Payton controls his stuff. Got his own label, his own brand. If you go online, some of y'all probably already put it in the chat, either on YouTube or Nubia. I have to look and see and scroll. But he's got his own thing. You want to purchase his stuff, you go to his website. Nick Payton he's a cultural warrior. Black American music. We got to control our own masters. You got to control our own music. You want to deal with me? You coming to me. I'm not coming to you. Now, he has won the Grammys. He's won all that stuff, but that's fine. But that's on the periphery. At the center is his practice, and that includes institution building. So when I heard, I'm like, I know that song, because when the Afro-Caribbean mixtape came out, the song that he used my voice on, talking about ways of knowing, talking about our children, our elders. The song is called Kimati. I was like, bro, use my name for a song. You didn't even tell me. So I called you and, asked you if I could use it. Sure. I didn't know you was going to compose. He played that song at the Tiny Desk, opening up. So cultural meaning making, marking your moment in time, is the Old Town Roads. Is the They Not Like Us's. It's marking whatever moment you're in time and space. Movement and memory is how you remember things across time and space, and how when you do your cultural meaning making, it's informed by previous generations that you deliberately cite and reference, even as you're creating your new thing. And so Nick Payton, I wish I could have been there for his Tiny Desk concert. Rakim, Tiny Desk, King's Paradise, that closing song at the end of Chill Hadari Coker's was showrunner for the Luke Cage series that came out, right? In Marvel, the Marvel television universe. Welcome to Harlem, right? You hear Rakim, the godfather of Harlem. He calls Philip Payton, the visionary who said Black people need spaces to live. And he says, what does he say? Garvey, Louis Armstrong. He name checks them all, right? In that scene when he's at the club that Luke Cage has taken over, that owns, from Cottonmouth, right? And then at the Tiny Desk, he does that. King's Paradise, the great Chuck Brown. How do you get a go-go band behind the Tiny Desk? Because Chuck, baby, don't give a Yeah, right. Anyway, and this week released Shaka Khan. And I won't repeat Shaka Khan's name over and over again because she has made it very clear over the years that I feel for you. Again, shout out to Prince. It ain't the song, it's the opening. And of course, with all due respect, cultural meaning making marks that in time. So there's generations of us who would say, Shaka Khan, Shaka Khan, Shaka Khan, let me rock you, Shaka Khan. Let me rock you. That's all I want to do. Shaka Khan, let me rock you, Shaka Khan. Let me rock you because I feel for you. He's like Mel and Mel. And then, of course, if you hear Step Off, which is the Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, step off. Because you got to be golf because you're soft. step off. Boom, 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 taken from the OJs for the love of money. And then Mel and Mel comes in and says, I was sitting on the corner just to wasting my time until I realized I was the king of the rhyme. I went on. Mel and Mel. And at the end, he says, I want to rock like I told Shaka. I said, Shaka Khan, let me rock you, Shaka Khan. Let me rock you because I feel for you. And he slows it down and step off. Shaka Khan said, I hate that song. Shaka Khan said, I'm walking through airports. I'm trying to get something to eat. People coming up to me and say, Shaka Khan, Shaka Khan. She's like, I can't stand that song. But cultural meaning making in a moment in time, there are generations. They don't even get to, I feel for you. I think I love you. No, they're like, Shaka Khan, Shaka Khan, Shaka Khan. Stuck in that cultural meaning making, but it has transcended the generations because in movement and memory, that becomes a marker, not just for a performer. That becomes a marker for a standard. It doesn't even become a marker for Shaka Khan. I mean, it does become a marker for Shaka Khan, but to understand who Shaka Khan is, you can't just say who she is to other people. You got to say, who is she to us?
Looks like you need a Verizon home.
Oh no, that's fine. She is not a Yvette Marie Stevens. That's what mom and them named her. But understand, when you say Shaka Khan, we know, everybody here, all the old heads know, that's a shorthand. That's a shorthand for Shaka Adune Adufie Yemoya. Yemoya. That is from Ifa. Yemoya. You talking about a water goddess. You understand? Hordari Karifi Khan. That's Shaka Khan. All them names in the middle. I'm saying that, this is a sister who comes out of Chicago, and, Kim Delaney and them will walk you through this. Reverend Dr. Wright walk us through this. Everybody in Chicago knows Shaka Khan connected with the Black Panthers from the time she was in high school. Shaka Khan is a standard. Movement and memory means when you hear Shaka Khan, it ain't just Shaka Khan, Shaka Khan, Shaka Khan. It's a standard. It's Rufus and Shaka Khan. Do you like what you feel? People say, why didn't you perform I Feel For You? I'm on a tiny desk. I got a small amount of time. You can't tell me. You going back to Rufus. Tell me something good. Tell me that you love me. Yeah. Shaka Khan. And then Shaka Khan, when she says, I'm every woman, that's movement and memory. Why? Cultural meaning making is when she recorded it. Movement and memory is when Whitney records it. And at the end, what does Whitney Houston say? Shaka Khan. Shaka Khan. It's a different inflection than Mel Mel. Why? Because she's saying, I'm connected to you. In this generation, I'm with you. Mary J. Blige. Movement and memory. When she records Sweet Things, she don't say Shaka Khan, and God bless Mary J. Blige, because in that generation, Queen of Hip Hop, so that's cultural meaning making in that moment. And then you see Shaka Khan. I saw them do a duet. This was at Motown at the Apollo Live. I've seen it's got to be floating out there. I saw it in a hotel room in Detroit one time. I was out there for the African World Festival. This is years ago. And so I know it's got to be out there. This must have been 15, 20 years ago. And I'm sitting up late. I'm watching this, and it's on TV. And they do Sweet Thing together. And any of y'all find it, please drop it in one of the chats because I've been looking for it and I just need to take some time and look for it. But being gracious, Shaka let Mary J. Blige take the first verse. That's a good thing. And then Shaka came in and did a verse. And then by the time they got to, you are my feet, you are my fire, feeling of a slow desire. I just love me now or I'll go crazy. Well, you know what Shaka did. Mary J. Blige is right with her. They going. And then what happened? It's like when Magic Johnson or Charles Barkley talk about how Michael Jordan would go up and they'd all go up and they'd be together. And then you would start falling and Michael would start writing. Shaka went up in that upper register. Shit. All Mary J. Blige can do is this. Why? Because again, this is not, with all due respect to Joni Mitchell and Bob Dylan, with all due respect to Amy Winehouse, with all due respect to people who are clearly talented, Paul Simon, with all due respect to it's great. But now we in the governance formation. Now you are in the world of Shaka Khan, which is a world occupied by people like Donna Summer, which is a world occupied by people like Patti LaBelle and Nona Hendrix and Aretha Franklin. Okay, we together, Sid. We together. We community. You're great now. Excuse me for a minute. I'm going to go up here for a minute. I'm coming back, though. Yeah. Movement and memory. It puts us together. And then people come out. Yeah. Oh, no, Clive. Mr. Davis, you stay your ass outside. I want some money. I'll come sign with you for a minute. But this is another conversation. Some of these people, after going over Atlantic Records, of course, Clive Davis, you understand you can mine this for great profit. If you treat people with some humanity, they may even praise you beyond what you deserve. But that's fine because you're in it for the profit and also for the music. But we're in it for the institution building. That's why you got to, watch Sam Cooke with both eyes. You know what I'm saying? You let a Berry Gordy slip through, but Sam Cooke, it's a little bit problematic. Plus, you're friends with Malcolm X and all them. You got Jim Brown hanging around. This guy is problematic. But the point is this. Cultural meaning making ties generations together. In when it becomes movement and memory, how you move across time and space. And watching Shaka Khan in Tiny Desk this week, when Professor Black punched through the noise through the noise at Clark Atlanta's commencement almost a month ago to the day, and gave a commencement speech for the ages. Hundreds of thousands of people watched that commencement speech. It punched through the ether. It punched through the brain rot. It punched through and tapped into an algorithm, and the market decided, oh, this is a winner, let's amplify it, and people were drawn to it through the algorithm. You started seeing it pop up. Tiny Desk, I'm looking, and I'm saying the people who have connected to Shaka Khan are intergenerational. Because anybody can go to a Shaka Khan concert. It's like going to Stevie Wonder or Earth, Wind, and Fire. Anybody can go. And it could be whole families go. And you can see your grandmama stand up. And when you see, let me tell you, I'm sure for some of y'all, when you seen your granny get up and say, I wish I were your lover, but you act so undercover. Nana! Oh, in other words, it's gonna hit you. But the point is this: you can do that. That's Olodum in Brazil. When you go down there, it's connection, which is why Michael Jackson, by the way, used Olodum, the band, where you see whole families going to their concerts because they love that music. In the backing, when he did, all I want to say is they don't really care about us. When you see Olodum in that video, not the prison one, but the one where they had in the streets of Brazil, you see Olodum. That's a family kind of thing. Shaka Khan can do the same thing. So when I watched her and reminisced and shared and laughed with all of my friends who are in their 50s and 40s about Shaka Khan and Rufus pre-Shaka Khan solo, the first song I learned in Tennessee State's marching band, Ain't Nobody, boo-doo-doo. I still remember my part. That was the repeat it till we get to the break. When you put your arms around, boom, boom, boom. All of these are all, HBCU bands don't buy music. HBCU bands listen to the songs on the radio or the songs at the party, and then the students, in collaboration with the professors, score the whole thing and give it out. And then we memorize the music, because ain't nobody in no HBCU band gonna be caught dead on a field dancing with music on a little stick on their instrument. No, you got to memorize that stuff. And the first one we did was Ain't Nobody, Shaka Khan, because that was popular in 1983. But the point is this music that brings us together, I'm looking at the Tiny Desk on YouTube, and I see 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000. Then I said, let me take a gander at the other clicks. And I'm seeing 2.3 million, 1.2 million, 800,000. Now, Shaka Khan inching up toward the million. She may be over the million now. Y'all can check and let me know. But it ain't the numbers of some of these other things, because you realize that every generation, particularly now being driven by the technology, is marking things differently depending on what the external factors are doing, the algorithm, the machines, all this kind of thing. And so I'm saying all that to say this: when you look at a little pamphlet like this, Juneteenth, there was no internet when John Mason Brewer went around the state of Texas collecting stories. And what Brewer says here at the beginning, he says, let me just read this. He says, I began consciously collecting these tales 6 or 7 years ago. Some of them were told to me by ex-slaves themselves. Others were told by the sons and daughters of slaves. Still others by grandchildren of slaves going to college. I want to pause here. The meaning of Juneteenth. There's a reason why Karen Hunter says, I didn't want this to be a federal holiday. It's like a kid once said many years ago, somebody wrote it down and says, Martin Luther King is for everybody. Malcolm X is for us. I would amend that in terms of Juneteenth and the 4th of July to say the 4th of July belongs to the criminal settler state known as the United States of America. Juneteenth is for us. Oh, good. Thank you, Prof. Prof just put in the private chat. She's at 1.1 million. Good. Because I know it was early. So yeah. And people, because look, one thing about quality, it's always going to rise. Shaka Khan is always going to rise. Through the fire, to the limit, to the wall. And her fellow Chicagoan, Kanye, Movement and Memory. You're going to speed it up. You're going to put it with Luther and remix it. But guess what? Hip hop, when done very deliberately, is a brilliant practice of movement and memory, particularly when you know what you're listening to. Rakim is a master at it. You hear Mahogany, starts with Al Green. Baby, why did you wait so long, baby? Rakim lifts that up. Me and Eric B. was sitting at the Palladium, seen an all-world cover girl that said, hey, lady, I'm sorry. He takes it and makes it into Mahogany. Movement and memory is shot through in hip-hop. Now, when you turn it toxic, you're just going for the beat. So at the end of The Last Poets, talking about when the revolution comes, they said the revolution is not going to come yet because we done got distracted. And until the revolution comes, and I know, N-words will party and bullshit and party. So the now thoroughly disgraced Sean Combs takes that party and bullshit and makes it the center of the Christopher Wallace tune. Now, when he did, parenthetically, and I'll come back a footnote, when Sean Combs did get that honorary degree from Howard University at the time, the new president of Howard University, Wayne Frederick, and the board of trustees signed off on it, giving an honorary degree to Sean Combs. Trust me on this. Some of y'all were in that faculty who screamed bloody murder. Have you lost your mind? Wait, did you ever have a mind to lose? What? A mind is a terrible thing to waste. Anyway, or as Ben Yakinen would say, Dr. Ben remixing the UNCF slogan, a mind is a terrible thing to lose. But anyway, so this whole rescinding of the degree, and I would say giving back the money, but as we always speculated, it never gave the money in the first place. So anyway, all that now, thankfully, in the past. But as Nathan Hare might say, when I come back to Nathan Hare in a second, when you're dealing with Negro colleges, yeah, this happened because of embarrassment. It didn't happen because of any moral conviction, because had there been some kind of moral stance, you might not have given it out in the first place. I'm not saying that I could always, rely on, or any of us could rely on everything Jaguar Wright says, or any of those cats. But at any rate, the idea that these young parties that were held in New York and DC and other places weren't anything other but practice for what we ended up seeing a little peek of and making the band. Let's be clear. Okay? Let's be clear. And sometimes institution building, when you connect it with other stuff that ain't necessarily for us, you can claim it's for us, but the proof is in the pudding. Shout out to the Breakfast Club on Revolt TV. But the point is this: when J. Mason Brewer is connecting, he's connecting generations. And this is what he writes. Again, he says, I began consciously collecting these tales 6 or 7 years ago. This was published in 1932. So he's collecting it in the 1920s. There are those who were formerly captive who are still alive in the 1920s. This isn't, if you go back in our archive, you'll see the conversation we had around Ophelia Settled Egypt, who was here in the DC area, who worked with Charles Johnson at Fisk to record the memories of formerly oppressed people. And they did it before the Works Progress Administration. You all can go online and find that stuff, and you can certainly go into our archive and our in-class conversations and hear us, and you can hear, because Professor Hunter played it, the voice of Ophelia Egypt on a recording, an album she made I have in the other room. J. Mason Brewer is recording those stories before even Charles Johnson and Ophelia Egypt. He says, I began consciously collecting these tales 6 or 7 years ago. Some of them were told to me by ex-slaves themselves. Others were told by the sons and daughters of slaves, movement and memory. Still others by grandchildren of slaves going to college. So now you're talking about those Africans who came into institutions, Black institutions. In a minute, we'll talk about Nathan Hare, born in Slick, Oklahoma. Not Slick for oil slick. It was named for a dude named Slick. I think his name was Tom Slick. 1932. April 9th, 1932. Same birthday as Paul Robeson, as he would always remind folks that Nathan Hare was born on April 9th, 1932. Hare talks about the fact that Slick was an oil town. It went from not existing about 30, 40 miles southwest of Tulsa. And of course, we saw what happened in terms of the betrayal. Well, it wasn't can it be a betrayal if you never meant good toward people? So we know Mother Fletcher and her sister, her sister in struggle, not satisfied with the Oklahoma Supreme Court. They're going to ask them to reconsider. And we hope perhaps that Black America's Attorney General, Kristen Clark, might convince the greatest beneficiary of affirmative action. Well, maybe John Roberts is the greatest, but Merrick Garland is right there with him, the Attorney General of the United States, perhaps to open up an investigation on the bloodlust in Tulsa, Oklahoma that happened in 1921 and related areas. As we heard last week and this week, Karen, you talked about it, and this question of the invasion. But Tulsa, Oklahoma, of course, is the birthplace of Julia Hare, Nathan Hare's wife and partner for over 6 decades, who made transition in 2019. Nathan Hare was born outside of Tulsa and really outside of the city limits of the little town called Slick, Oklahoma. But went to Toussaint Louverture, actually. Toussaint Louverture High School in Slick, Oklahoma, after his mother moved them to California. They lived for a time some other places, but they came back to Slick, which is where he graduated from high school, went to John Mercer Langston University, college at the time, now university, named, of course, for the formerly enslaved African who became the dean of Howard University's law school, and for a year and a half, the president of Howard University, and that would be John Mercer Langston. John Langston has a school named for him in Oklahoma. Slick was founded before Oklahoma was a state, it's a territory. And by the time that Nathan Hare in high school, who wanted to be a boxer, was told by one of his teachers, he had a English teacher he loved and adored, and another teacher that he loved and adored. And the brother was like, look, man, you need to be thinking about college. Hare said, I wasn't thinking about college. He ends up applying for and getting a fellowship after he enrolls and is graduated from Langston, now Langston University in Langston, Oklahoma, one of those all Black towns. It's there while he's being a dorm captain and leader on campus and pledges Omega Psi Phi. A mistake, but that's okay. I understand. He meets his wife, Julia Hare, from Tulsa, who a good Delta and top of the class student, and they spend the rest of their lives together. But I'm saying all that to say that they met at an HBCU at Langston University in Oklahoma. And it is at some of these Black colleges that John Brewer meets some of the grandchildren of the oppressed. Why are they in college? They're in college to advance the race. And it's that sensibility that Nathan and Julia Hare take into their academic work before they leave academia. Nathan Hare, after being fired not once but twice, the first time from a Negro college, who he has some words for that I'll read in a minute as we kind of wrap this up shortly. But John Mason Brewer, for the third and final time, I began consciously collecting these tales 6 or 7 years ago. Some of them were told to me by ex-slaves themselves. Others were told by the sons and daughters of slaves. Still other by grandchildren of slaves going to college. Not all of them came from Negroes. Because guess what? People been overhearing cultural meaning making of African people for years. The social structures that African people have found themselves in the modern world system have benefited greatly from the cultural meaning making of African people. In the article I referred to earlier that was in Thursday's New York Times, caution, online gluttony may induce mockery. This is talking about the effects of social media. Says the term brain rot, which appeared online as early as 2007, is meant to be playful, but its rise in popularity relates to growing recognition of a disorder that researchers at Boston's Children's Hospital have called problematic interactive media use. Dr. Michael Rich, a pediatrician who founded the digital wellness lab at the hospital, said that his patients referred to brain rot as, quote, a way of describing what happens when you spend a lot of your time online and you have shifted your awareness over to the online space as opposed to, wait for it, IRL, and are filtering everything through the lens of what has been posted and what can be posted. For those who are not up on the lingo, IRL means in real life, and it is a symptom, according to these researchers, of brain rot. It's giving brain rot. Wait for it. It's giving brain rot. It's giving, another shorthand phrase, which they are saying is attendant to the concept of brain rot. When you start integrating these shorthands into your everyday speech, and then they start showing up in the papers you turn in or the memory and the memos you write, your language has literally began to rot. Beginning of this article says, by Jessica Roy, if you or someone you love speaks almost exclusively in internet references, quote, it's giving golden retriever boyfriend energy, end quote. Or, quote, show it to me, Rachel, end quote. They may be suffering from a condition known as, quote, brain rot, end quote. The term refers primarily to low-value internet content and the effect caused by spending too much time consuming it. Example, quote, I've been watching so many TikToks, I have brain rot, end quote. But in that process, the concept of how Africana cultural meaning making has now seeped into social structure spaces where non-Africans are is very clear. So when Joe Biden shows up at Leonard McKelvey's Breakfast Club and says, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. And people jump on him, say, why y'all jumping on Joe? Why y'all jumping on Genocide Joe? Because you want to call him Genocide Joe now, but you've been hanging out with him a long time. Now, I know ain't none of y'all jumped the shark, to use a Happy Days reference from the 1970s or 80s, and kissed the back of his hand at a Juneteenth concert. Shout out to Billy Porter. But the simple fact of the matter is that social structure has been inundated with Africana for fun and profit since we've been here. There would be no people when people say, black music is American music. The only original music America has produced is the blues, R&B, and hip hop. Okay. Thank you for explaining who we are to other people, because you keep it a buck and deal with the Africana center of it. Not that it hasn't been influenced by other things, but the foundation is Africana. So when J. Mason Brewer says not all of them came from Negroes, he's making a point. He goes on and says, though all of them are Negroid. For aged white men, once slaveholders, contributed to my stock. So you're a racist? Yeah, but you love telling them black stories, huh? Like them Patriot fans who, not the ones that ignored Jay-Z as he put himself on display and found out his real cultural status in a moment that Jacob Perez would probably chuckle at and say, you need to read Science and Oppression and Ordinal Classifications. You don't really rank in here. I'm talking about them rabid fans at the NFL, or for that matter, the WNBA, who going to say, oh, Caitlin Clark is being mistreated, and then in the next breath, quote every line in a hip-hop song. Not all of them came from Negroes, though all of them are Negroid, for aged white men once slaveholders contributed to my stock. You hate black people, but you love the culture, don't you? As Greg Tate once said, everything but the burden is what you want from black people. A country store, he writes, on Saturday afternoon, a wagon load of cotton on its way to the gin, the bank of a fishing hole, the tenement district of a Texas city where the shotgun style of house prevails, the seats for loafers in second and third class barbershops, the grounds of rural schools and churches, the setting for Saturday night supper and platform dance. Such have been the places where I garnered. He's getting these stories. And by the way, go back again. I encourage you all, for those who didn't see our first conversations, this is why we have the archive. You've got to go back to 2020 when we did our conversation in session 13. You got to go back to 2021 where we had our conversation. That is, of course, session 67. And we talked about the process of Juneteenth. Remember, 2020, we're in the middle of the reckoning. You go back to 13, what had not happened yet was 21, because you know what happened in 21, because for a minute, the social structure of this country thought that we was getting ready to renegotiate the terms of the whole damn thing. Ahmaud Arbery's killed. Breonna Taylor is killed. Oh my God, they're protesting. And then Big George Floyd is murdered. Memorial Day weekend. So if you go back 4 short years to this season, we in the streets. Yeah, I had the Fred Douglass blowout afro with the white because anybody got no barbershops open. Well, we were in the street right down there in front of the White House. That's before Black Lives Matter Square was painted. And a mayor and Muriel Bowser, who's always trying to displace the unhoused while saying she's not, because tourists come to DC in the summertime. We need y'all to see all this. And John Lewis, before he made transition, standing in the middle of the street with her, now they done painted Black Lives Matter Square. John Lewis, who remembers getting beatings 2 generations before. And Donald Trump walking across with Tony Barr, his attorney general. Again, this thing's like ancient days, but it's not. It just happened with tear gas and an upside down Bible. And all that energy poured into a defensive tactic, using the vote as a weapon to get him out of the White House. And if people think, oh, Biden is the same as Trump, do you even remember 4 years ago? Oh, fine. Let him get back in. That'll look like a training run. You better read Project 2025. I'm going to come back to that in a second, too. But that was when we did session 13. And by the time we got to 67, they were signing Juneteenth into a law. And I stood there in the White House watching Joe Biden sign this into law. And everybody clapping. I'm standing back there with the security guards and the people who work in the White House staff, these young black people, including a couple from Texas. If y'all go back and look at session 67, we'll go chapter and verse through what happened that day. Mother Opal Lee there, who we just saw got a house back. You say they gave her a house. They didn't give her nothing. That's her land. You know, people are doing a favor for themselves. Now, you know, she's very gracious. Still hailing Hardy, still swinging with both fists. It's a beautiful thing. But let's be very clear, in Texas, y'all took that land from her family. But guess what? The fact that they own that land in the first place, the question of ownership, who was there before you? The indigenous people. They pulled us into a criminal enterprise, y'all. And if we start it with the criminal enterprise, we will never get to the point we need to get to build a better society, is which everybody needs to be made whole. It's an important concept to have. And that made whole is a matter of American practice or democracy. With all due respect to everybody who says somebody like a Mary McLeod Bethune or Paula S.E. Robeson did it for American democracy. They did not. They did it for our common humanity. American democracy is how this social structure gets to continue to hide its criminal sins behind the idea that somehow its founders thought differently. Do you forgotten that all of them had us enslaved? See, when you forget, it makes your statements so absurd that they can't be digested. Brain rot didn't start with TikTok. Anyway, the whole process then, by 2021, session 67, it's going to be it's a holiday. Now what? And then we come to 2022, 119. We talked about these rituals that J. Mason Brewer is talking about. J. Mason Brewer is talking about the places he collected these stories about Africana cultural meaning making in Texas and beyond. These stories took place at rituals Africans convene, people of African descent. And when we were talking in 119, it was with our dear beloved sister, Dr. Amin, Sunyata Amin, about the foods of Juneteenth, all that red, the color of Shango, one of the colors of Eshu and Ifa. Red, that survives across the so-called Middle Passage and enslavement. Red, cultural meaning making, conveying ways of knowing, whether it be in the soda or the cake, whether it be in the barbecue sauce, the rituals of Juneteenth. John Henry Yates, Jack Yates, formerly enslaved, coming out of Virginia, finding his way into Texas because he sold out there. And then after emancipation, after they fight their way out of enslavement, 1872, 1873, putting his money together with others and buying what is to this day Emancipation Park in Houston, right across the street from this high school named for him, John Henry Jack Yates High School, the same school that George Floyd attended. These things move in circles and cycles, and the momentum of memory allows us to connect them over generations. That's what the movement and memory category is for. So the Juneteenth parades are not new in Texas. They're not new in Buffalo, New York, or Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They're not new in Rochester, Minnesota, or Minneapolis, St. Paul. They're not new in Philadelphia. They're not new in Washington, D.C. They are not new in places beyond the South, because it isn't just a parade. Most of these rituals were held at spiritual centers among African people in the 19th century. We talked about it, and again, I'm not going to go through all this because we got a huge archive on it, and including all the footnotes. As I mentioned, Wiggins' book on celebrations. I mentioned the recent book on Juneteenth, all of those things, even Annette Gordon-Reed's small book on Juneteenth, the children's books on Juneteenth. I mentioned Gerald Horn from last year. But again, in talking about these things, these are the places. The cooking that starts at the beginning of the week and goes through June 19th. The speeches that are made by spiritual leaders, the prayers, and then here come the politicians, because they realize this is where the black people are, including some white politicians. Can I talk? Yeah, just for a second. You can talk for a minute, to quote Tevin Campbell, and then we got to go back to what we were doing. Why? Because Juneteenth was a moment to recognize black self-determination, black progress, and black aspiration. So we talked about that, and Sunyata helped us understand the things we ingest that come along with that cultural meaning making, because food is a form of ways of knowing and cultural meaning making, to use our Africana Studies session. And then finally, last year, 171. That was the moment when the first Juneteenth concert at the White House took place. And I was so honored to be there because, Ajwa Bachwa Osmore said, "You want to come?" I said, "Yeah." So we went down there. Myself, Erica Sekoye, Mario Beatty, Valethia Watkins, Angie Porter. We said, yeah, because Angie she grew up in Juneteenth. She born in San Antonio, Texas. Her family moved to Rochester, Minnesota. And so she's been doing Juneteenth for her entire life with the red soda and everything. And so in the whole point of being at that concert wasn't for Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. It was for, I got to see my people, Tennessee State Marching Band perform. So many people. Lettucey did a version of Let's Stay Together, another Al Green staple, movement and memory. And things changed from year to year. Cultural meaning making that time was different than cultural meaning making this time. We had office hours Monday night. I saw some people had smoke for Laree, had smoke for L. Joy Williams and Clay Kane at the thing. No, I don't have no smoke for them. Because whenever you see them, they fight for us. Had smoke for Reese. No, they fight for us. They fighting for us in that space. They fighting for us when they connect with people in that space. I was down there. I don't fight for us. I fight for us all the time. When I shook Joe Biden's hand after, didn't kiss it, shout out to Billy Porter. When I shook Joe Biden's hand at the White House after the signing, Miss Opal Lee was sitting right there. It's the four of us, Miss Opal Lee, the sister who was with her, Joe Biden, myself. And he said, "Are you teaching Howard?" Yeah. He said, "Oh, that's not my favorite college. My favorite HBCU was Delaware State." That's his punchline, right? Because he's from Delaware. He knows President Tony Allen, president. I said, "I understand, Mr. President, but I didn't go to Howard. I'm a field HBCU Negro. I actually went to Tennessee State University. Yeah, I work at Howard, though." And he was like, "Ah!" And there's a picture that Ajwa snapped of Miss Lee, Miss Opal, looking like, "What the hell did you just say? Man, don't pick no ice with me." Look, you lose your tongue in the middle of... Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't eat your heart. Be who you are wherever you are. So, ease up on my people, man. We was there. It's all right. It's all good. But in that 171, remember at that same Juneteenth conversation, Opal Lee, she said, we got to have health care. We got to deal with the climate. We got to deal with education. We got to deal with all of that. And if we don't, this whole country, she didn't say it was going, yes, she did. Hell in a handbasket. Yikes. And the vice president was like, and on that note, sis, you can't say it. you've strayed a little bit from them early Kwanzaa celebrations you and your sister were from. But we understand you got to get elected. I understand all that. But let's be clear. Mother Opal Lee ain't got to curb her tongue or eat her heart. So she said, we all going to hell in a hazmat basket unless we deal with this right now. And when she opened and said, we are the strongest country in the United States, you can say, well, she misspoke. Maybe she did, but them ancestors came through her. We are a country, as Amiri Baraka said. And then Nikhil Pal Singh used it for the title of his book. In America, black is a country. Nathan Hare understood that. So if you want to go back and look at the Juneteenth conversations, then you can know what we talked about in all of those. But I want to kind of, and by the way, I saw the petition. I haven't had a chance to sign it yet, but I am going to sign it to, not that it will change anything in Hollywood, but to say that Billy Porter should not play James Baldwin. He's been linked to and identified with, and I'm working on the script for the James Bond. I saw the comments that Billy Porter made about Palestine and Israel, saying it's not his fight, saying that this movie's going to focus on James Baldwin's domestic issues in the United States and not international. But that lets us know right now, sir, that you are completely unqualified to play James Baldwin. In fact, it's offensive. It is offensive. And I'll tell you why it's offensive in particular, because social structures reduce us to identities, projected identities. That's why you even have to come up with some theory called intersectionality, which I don't use. I'm aware of and dialogue with, but don't ground in my own practice in terms of Africana studies, because to have intersectionality means that you divided us into intersections in the first place. And that is absolutely not in our ways of knowing as we think about them as a grounding practice. But this idea that somehow because James Baldwin was gay and you're gay and, you think somehow you're just going to squeeze him in. Don't do that. That's offensive. That's offensive to any human being, regardless of identity, regardless of posture. Anytime somebody, I don't care what your background is, what your sexuality is, what your choices are, you stand up and say, well, this ain't about this Baldwin. This is about, no, you can't disaggregate James Baldwin. James Baldwin was an internationalist. Stranger in the Village. Go read that essay by James Baldwin. Don't do that. Or do it. Do it all you want. Be you. What you're not going to do is be embraced as an avatar for someone who was so very expansive that you can't reduce him to that kind of stupid statement. So yeah, I'm going to sign that petition, by the way. I saw it. Anyway, not that it's going to do any good, because as my mama would say, as Catherine Carr would say, white folks do what they want to do. Anyway, I'm not going to, something else came to my mind, but I'm going to leave that alone. People talk about this question of Black studies, and that's where I want to just spend a little bit of time today. Not long. We had a mini reminder this week in terms of Tulsa and the ruling of the Oklahoma Supreme Court, which wasn't a surprise, that living victims of murder in Tulsa cannot receive any form of compensation. Forget reparations or restitution, because that world is gone, for what happened to them. And, people are arguing, lawyers are arguing whether or not it was the right choice in terms of the statute to use, the Oklahoma law, whether or not the forum was right to go to state court first and not go to federal court. You're dealing with elders who are now well into their, one going into Mother Fletcher, the second decade of her 100th plus year, 110. You're talking about legal choices, how long they're going to be here. It doesn't matter how long they're here, because the estate of Hughes Ellis, her brother, was also represented. And again, we're not talking about, we don't fall into the trap of, you got to prove to the people who victimized you that you as an individual were harmed. That's not what, we're not operating in that legal universe. There's a larger universe that we're imposing ourselves on. And because that universe that we are working in, and we are standing in our own truth. So yeah, we saw that. We saw that this week. But in the context of the other cases that came from the Supreme Court, which I will mention very quickly now, the case dealing with the so-called abortion pill, people are saying it was a victory. And so mifepristone, the mifepristone is allowed. You can still mail it. You can still receive it. The rules of the Federal Food and Drug Administration remain in place, those administrative rules, which say that you don't have to have an in-person visit to a doctor to get the prescription. that you can get those pills up into the 10th week of a pregnancy. But if you look at Beer Kavanaugh's opinion, then you understand what's at stake here. And this is where I will quote from the, if I can pull it up here on the computer. Let me see, not Garland versus Cargill. I'm looking for Project 2025, which y'all can still download. I would encourage you to do that. Let's see if I can find it quickly. If I can't, I'll refer to it in the abstract, but I'm hoping I can find it quickly enough to quote it in here. Let me see. I think I can find it. Give me a second here, y'all, and I can look for, there we go. This is going to bother me until I find it. And you know, I usually have a thing in print, but I'm not going to tell y'all everything I'm doing to get a hold of a print copy of this, because here we are. That's very nice. Somebody got a print copy, y'all reach out to me and let me know in Nubia, because I have the whole thing. You know, I'm about halfway through. It's like 900 pages. So, but here's where we deal with abortion pills. This is on page 457 of the mandate, which they call the mandate, Project 2025. Page 457 near the bottom, subtitle, Abortion Pills. Abortion pills pose the single greatest threat to unborn children in a post-war world. The rate of chemical abortion in the United States has increased by more than 150%. In the past decade, more than half of annual abortions in the United States are chemical rather than surgical. I'm embarrassed to say that I did not know that that's not just over 50%. It's closer to 2/3. It's over 60% of terminated pregnancies take place as a result of chemical rather than surgical termination. In other words, the pills. Beer Kavanaugh, in the 9-0 opinion that upheld upheld the ability of people to, because rights is a slippery slope, as we know, to get access. Beer Kavanaugh said he put in that opinion where they're going. He said, perhaps another way to get at this would be if an administration decides to revisit the FDA regs. You know what that means? That means that when Trump wins, they're going to go to the Food and Drug Administration regs and say, we're no longer going to use these regulations. See, their whole war is with the administrative apparatus, what they call the deep state, part of the deep state, the administrative courts. They don't like the FDA. They don't like the Federal Aviation Agency, the FAA. They don't like any regulating group. They want to either eliminate them or severely curtail them and unleash their billionaire friends who are paying for all this. So understand that what they did was basically say, wait a minute, let's get past November, because people don't like this decision. So don't take that 9-0 as a signal that they stand with people having access to terminating pregnancies. No, they still in the same Handmaid's Tale world. It just ain't time yet. And when you read it, Kavanaugh is telling them basically, just wait till you can take the FDA, but it's going to require you to take the presidency. And it wasn't just 9-0. Guess who wrote a concurrence? Oh, Harlan Crow's boy, Clarence Thomas, Jenny Thomas, the whole ass insurrectionist husband, Clarence. Clarence wrote a concurrence. You know what Clarence said? I agree with everything, but I'm saying that, we should address this question of third party standing, meaning you can't sue for somebody else. There are several other categories that are usually sometimes associated with third party standing: associational standing, organizational standing. Organizational standing is when an organization, what is that? Sounds like there's something going on outside. I hear a whistle blowing. Anyway, I hope it doesn't bother y'all. Organizational standing happens when an organization is suing on behalf of something that is invading its own interests, something that affects it. Because standing means you have been harmed. You got to establish standing to say, oh, I have been harmed, right? But Clarence Thomas said associational standing I don't think that's constitutional. He said, so I agree that the FDA can't do this and that there's overreach by these doctors who can't prove harm, because that's why they dismissed the case. They said they dismissed the case on standing. They said these doctors, these anti-abortion doctors in Texas who form shop till they get that right-wing judge that we've been talking about a lot, Matthew Kaczmarek, at the federal district court there in Texas. He's the one who's ready to do the whole ideologue war. So they go to his court and he's like, yeah, these pills are illegal. Then they appeal, of course, as they must, to the Fifth Circuit, which is also now, right, these parties are the same, elections don't matter. Yeah, the president picks the judges and the Senate confirms the judges. If you want to know why it's important, look at this case. Look at the district court say you don't get the pills. The Federal Court of Appeals, the Fifth Circuit, out of New Orleans, you don't get the pills. Gets to the Supreme Court, they're like, wait a minute. And Clarence is like, I'm going to wait. But while we here, I'm going to agree with y'all, but I'm going to add this line. He says, associational standing isn't constitutional too. Who should be shaking in their boots? Everybody from Emily's List and the ACLU to the NAACP. Associational standing means you can't sue for these other people unless you prove direct harm. Clarence don't want nobody coming to court. And then, of course, we saw what happened yesterday with the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. That was the case where they somehow lost the ability to understand that these bump stock guns, like the ones that slaughtered all them people out west in Vegas, that is a machine gun. Clarence Thomas wrote the opinion, Garland versus Cargill, released yesterday, referring to the National Firearms Act of 1934, which defines a, quote, machine gun as any weapon which shoots, is designed to shoot, or can be readily restored to shoot automatically more than one shot without manual reloading by a single function of the trigger. With a machine gun, a shooter can fire multiple times or even continuously by engaging the trigger only once. This capability distinguishes a machine gun from a semi-automatic firearm. With a semi-automatic firearm, the shooter can fire only one time by engaging the trigger, so forth, so forth. And then they go on now, Thomas, in the notes, the head notes to the case. For many years, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives consistently took the position that semi-automatic rifles equipped with bump stocks were not machine guns under Section 5845B. ATF abruptly changed course when a gunman using semi-automatic rifles equipped with bump stocks fired hundreds of rounds into a crowd in Las Vegas. So then Michael Cargill surrendered 2 bump stocks to ATF under protest and filed suit to challenge the rule. Goes on. Clarence Thomas, writing for the fascist majority, says technically that ain't a machine gun. It's semi-automatic. It's not a machine gun. So therefore, the ATF overreached in interpreting it as a machine gun. And therefore, the ATF, because it overreached, that finding that it was a machine gun is not constitutional. Wow. Really? All right. Now, what does that mean? That means that the ATF, Bureau ATF, changed its interpretation of the regulations that is within its right to do. And Supreme Court said, no, Congress got to do that. See, that's their go-to now. Congress got to change the law. Congress got to be explicit. Why do they want to do that? Because they know that between the Electoral College and extreme gerrymandering, which they've decided, even if it's racial, if you can say it's political, it's non-justiciable, you can't go after it. They have locked in this white minority rule, or so they think. This is what happens when people don't get engaged in the political process. They think they have now figured out a way to get white minority rule, coming white minority rule in place, including their blackface servant, Clarence Thomas, cheaply bought for a motor home and some trips to exotic islands and a couple of cigars. But I should use the word Roland Martin called him Thursday night, a judicial thought. Anyway, the point is that they think they figured it out. Throw everything to the legislature, make sure the legislature stays in eternal gridlock, and do it. And plus, by the way, with those pills, y'all see this whole thing of overturning Roe versus Wade and returning it to the states, that's been a lie since the beginning. We talked about that. They want a national ban on abortion. They want a national ban on abortion. The pills, they after the pills now, because even in places in states where it's legal, they want to make it illegal. They got something called a Comstock Act of 1873, which makes it illegal to mail anything, pornography, or anything related to abortion. We can talk about that another time. Larry has walked through it before, and she'll do it again, because this on her show, you can tune into Sirius. Again, $1 for 3 months, you can't beat that. Allow us to think together. But let me read quickly and move on from Sonia Sotomayor's dissent. This is what Sonia Sotomayor wrote and released yesterday, with Elena Kagan joining her and Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson joining her, dissenting. Quote, on October the 1st, 2017, a shooter opened fire from a hotel room overlooking an outdoor concert in Las Vegas, Nevada, in what would become the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. Within a matter of minutes, using several hundred rounds of ammunition, the shooter killed 58 people and wounded over 500. He did so by affixing bump stocks to commonly available semi-automatic rifles. These simple devices harness a rifle's recoil energy to slide the rifle back and forth and repeatedly bump the shooter's stationary trigger finger, creating rapid fire. All the shooter had to do was pull the trigger and press the gun forward. The bump stock did the rest. Congress has sharply restricted civilian ownership of machine guns since 1934. That would be the era of movement and memory outside of Africana, and in a social structure, the valorization of John Dillinger and Pretty Boy Floyd and Bonnie and Clyde, 1934. Federal law defines a, quote, machine gun, end quote, as a weapon that can shoot, quote, automatically more than one shot without manual reloading by a single function of the trigger, end quote. 26 United States Code, Section 5845B. Shortly after the Las Vegas massacre, the Trump administration, with widespread bipartisan support, banned bump stocks as machine guns under the statute. Today, the court puts bump stocks back in civilian hands. Clarence Thomas loved that Second Amendment. He wants to shoot everybody, except not them people who came up on Capitol Hill in the hillbilly horde, the White Walkers, who raided the United States Congress, the Capitol, on January 6, 2021. By the way, shout out to all the toadies who kissed the back of the hand, not Billy Porter at the Juneteenth concert, but every member of the Republican Party who kissed Donald Trump's hand on his birthday as he walked back up in that building, the same building he had sent the hillbilly horde to kill them. Now they over there kissing. Ted Cruz and little Lynn Graham and all clapping. Lord have mercy, power. You just can't stand. This man tried to kill y'all and y'all kissing his hand. Shout out to them. Today, Sonia Sotomayor writes, the court puts bump stocks back in civilian hands. To do so, it casts aside Congress's definition of machine gun and seizes upon one that is inconsistent with the ordinary meaning of the statutory text and unsupported by context or purpose. And here's the meat of it. Sotomayor was hot. She read this from the bench. You saw Ginsburg do this a couple of times. When you read a dissent from the bench, you making a point. Usually it's release them. She read this from the bench. And here's the language. Some of y'all saw it, maybe many of you, but for the few who didn't, this is what she says, quote, when I see a bird that walks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, I call that bird a duck. A bump stock equipped semi-automatic rifle fires, quote, automatically more than one shot without manual reloading by a single function of the trigger, end quote, section 5845B. Last sentence, Sotomayor says, because I, like Congress, call that a machine gun, I respectfully dissent. If I see a bird that walk like a duck, talk like a duck, quack like a duck, I call that bird a duck. Since they said machine gun, I'm going to use. But guess what? Ain't stop them because they had the numbers. 6-3. Dear Kavanaugh, Gorsuch McConnell, the Christian soldier Sam Alito, who at this point is completely off the chain, and the handmaid. And John Boyd balls and strikes Roberts with them. Oh, but elections don't matter. Listen, they put them machine guns back in the hands of the killers. And she's saying, look, y'all done lost y'all mind. This time, I'm not going to be polite about it and collegial. Let's deal with it. So I want to end today by talking a little bit. First of all, thanks to everybody who came to Ohio. Over 100 people. We talked about it in office hours on Monday night. Mama Olabisi Kalade and Baba Kweku Larry Crow at the center of the Dayton Council of Elders, Mama Nozipo, and everybody else. People came from all over. Many from the Midwest, of course, from Columbus and from places like Detroit and Cleveland and other places who came in, but also New York, also, you know, the DMV who came in. It was just a beautiful gathering. So many Nubians from all over, real world companions, Shimsu, to use Aikwe Ahmad's work, Wadin Shimsu. We are companions. We are Shimsu. We are working together. It was a beautiful thing. I'll mention, of course, we got news today, I guess early this morning, late last night, that the great Afro-Cuban singer, well, Cuban roots, but of course, a lot of people may or may not know that Angela Bofield made transition early, 70, 71. There had been rumors before. She combated them, had recovery, had a couple of challenges, health challenges. But again, movement in memory. Shout out to 313. I see you now. I'm looking over here now. Yeah, you may have to do that. Get some bump stocks. I want to mention a sister and elder, 93 when she made transition, Vina Baker. Mama Vina Baker, one of the great stalwarts, daughter of Jamaica, but who was solidly Brooklyn through and through. Everybody from Brooklyn probably know Mama Vina. Eljoy and Larry, y'all probably know Mama Vina. She was at everything. She was one of the founding members of the First World Alliance, the great African study group associated with the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations in Harlem. That's where I knew Mama Vina from. Every time I would sit with her, I learned something new. She worked for many years in healthcare as a nurse. And she said, I would work, I'd do my shift, and then I would rush to get to Harlem for First World. A stalwart member of the United African Movement, the great Alton and Leola Maddox. Well known in Brooklyn in political fields. I saw a picture of her. Mama Latrella Thornton shared it with me yesterday. I don't know if it was at the West Indian Parade or she was there with Congresswoman Clark, Yvette Clark, of course, whose mother was on city council in New York. Charles Barron and Inez Barron. So many things, tributes are pouring forth. I think there's a ritual scheduled for next week, the 25th. About 10 days from now. We'll see if I can get some more information on that. Also, my brother, Randy Fuller, my sister's husband, his sister Ernestine Fuller made transition yesterday in Atlanta. Just a beautiful spirit. Again, this family out of North Florida, South Georgia, just brilliant Africans. And for everybody who has had someone make transition in the time since we've been together or who have not been mentioned, please, we ring the bell for all of y'all. And for everybody who was in Ohio last week when we did the ritual there at the cemetery, and for all of our beloved friends at the National Afro-American Museum and Cultural Center there in Wilberforce, thank you. And I'm glad I said this now because it's something I wanted to make sure. I said it in office hours, but for the folks who are not yet in Nubia, this is called Prophets of the Dream, AME Church and the Fight for Freedom. This is a project at the museum, the National Afro-American Museum and Cultural Center, 1350 Brush Road, Wilberforce. The museum is doing a major exhibit on a traveling exhibit they're developing on the AME Church. I'm just going to show this so y'all can pause if you want to pause the video later. They're looking for oral histories for people connected with the AME Church in any shape, form, or fashion. There's Bishop Payne, Daniel Alexander Payne. We passed by Payne Seminary when we were out there. They're looking for artifacts. If you own any of these artifacts, you can see there, you can contact them at info@aamcc@ohiohistory.org or by phone there. You see the phone number there, 800-752-2603, extension 0. I'm only doing that for those who may be listening on a podcast and who aren't watching the visual. I thought there was a CR code, but it's not. But anyway, I wanted to put that information out. So the last minute I want to spend with Nathan Hare, as I've mentioned, a man who is called the father of Black studies. You can't really talk about Nathan Hare without talking about his wife, Julia Hare. Most of my stuff is in storage, but the ancestors have a way to let you know that they're somewhere around you. And these are very young ancestors. We're lifting them up. I have all of their books, but this is one of, actually, I think I might have Mama Julia's book. One of her, maybe her latest ones. I thought I had it in here. Yeah, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep swiveling around until I put my eye on it. So I should probably either stop shortly. Yeah, because I will do this until I find it. And I need to show this one. This is one called The Endangered Black Family, coping with the unisexualization and coming extinction of the Black race. This is from the Black Think Tank. This was published 5 years after they started the Black Think Tank in San Francisco, the Endangered Black Family. This is Nathan Hare and Julia Hare. If you go on, remember when Tavis Smiley was having those tours, him and Tom Joyner and them, they were doing these Black conversations, and there have been some very much almost like a revelation of some of that conversation. There it is. That's what I was looking for. The in fact, let me just show it to y'all now. This is the sexual and political anorexia of the Black woman. This is called by Julia Hare, The Pain, Guts, and Glory of the Black Woman. Julia Hare, forward by Nathan Hare. Very interesting. You see the back cover there. This was published, bringing it full circle, by the Black Think Tank. This was published in 2008. Mama Julia made transition Dr. Hare in 2019. If you see, like, there's a famous clip that went around everywhere at one of those convenings that Tavis had that shows Julia Hare breaking some stuff down about the Black family. These two were always talking about the Black State of the Union, State of the Black Union. Thank you, y'all. These two, and this is just two of them. This is just two of them. Other titles that they did together. Julia Hare wrote one, How to Find and Keep a BMW. BMW standing for Black Man Working. Nathan Hare's most famous book, of course, was his book, The Black Anglo-Saxons, which I couldn't find my copy. I got probably a half dozen of those copies. I hope I didn't put them all in storage. It's a little book. And of course, finding a little book in here is a little difficult. They wrote a book called The Black Agenda, another one called Crisis in Black Sexual Politics. They did a book called The Miseducation of the Black Child, one called Bringing the Black Boy to Manhood, The Passage. And Julia Hare took the story of Mabel Little, because remember, Julia Hare is from Tulsa, and published a book called Fire on Mount Zion, an account of the Black Holocaust of 1921 in Tulsa, Black Wall Street. Again, this is not new information, but Julia Hare, I raised her because Julia Hare and Nathan Hare together, that's what they did. Those two power couple for over 60 years. And Nathan Hare was, they call him the father of Black studies for good reason. I don't believe in single parents. So there's mothers and fathers, there's brothers and sisters, there's all forms of relationship, there's community. But Nathan Hare sat at the center of this, and it's very important to understand. As I said, from Slick, Oklahoma, graduated from Toussaint Louverture High School and Slick, the Black school. Oh, by the way, Julia Hare in Tulsa went to Booker T. Washington Elementary School, George Washington Carver Junior High School, and graduated from Booker T. Washington High School in Tulsa. Again, Black institutions shaping them. Nathan Hare wasn't thinking about college until one of his professors in high school, had a doctorate, said, son, why don't you go to Langston? He said, okay. He was a boxer. Understand, Langston, Oklahoma, where Langston University is, was founded by, among others, Edward McCabe, because they wanted Oklahoma to be a majority Black state. It was founded in 1890. So it ain't just about Black Wall Street, as you heard Professor Hunter, as we heard you talk about this week. When you see Greenwood in Tulsa, the Greenwood district is connected to those Black towns. There were a lot of Black towns. One of the first was Langston. They wanted Oklahoma to be a Black state. Mind you, now it's commingling with the indigenous people, very complicated relationship, the Black Seminoles, so-called Black Seminoles, and the Seminole Nation there, coming across through the Trail of Tears in the territory. One of Nathan Hare's one of his professors was Melvin Tolson. That's right, the same Melvin Tolson who had been at Wiley College. When you see the Great Debaters, the one that Denzel Washington played, Melvin B. Tolson, Melvin Tolson was a hell of a guy. Read his Harlem Portraits. Read any of the work of Melvin Tolson. You understand how deep of an impact he made on his students. Simon Alexander Haley taught at Langston. Simon Alexander Haley, you know him through his son. That would be Alex Haley. You remember in Roots the Next Generation, I think it was Dorian Harewood that played Simon. He went off to be a teacher. That was Langston. That's where Nathan Hare went to school. Nathan Hare, and you know what? Maybe we'll pick some of this up in office hours, because I'm looking now, we're right at the 2 hour and 8 minute term. And I don't want to go too far into this, but I think we have to listen to Nathan Hare, because Nathan Hare represents the best of our traditions. Nathan Hare was at Howard University in a role of assistant professor of sociology. And I went back through the Hilltops, which have all been digitized if you go on Howard University's website. And Nathan Hare was writing these opinion op-ed pieces in the student newspaper. He's publishing, he's having all these meetings. He said, I wasn't very popular as a sociology professor when I first came to Howard in the early 1960s, but then the radical students found me and the student body kind of changed and they got more and more radicalized. So I had Stokely Carmichael as one of my students, Claude Brown, who wrote Man, Child in the Promised Land, as one of my students, Ewart Brown, who became the student body president, who led the Black University protest to take over the administration building. This is when Felicia Allen and her sister Debbie Allen were in school at Howard. This was the Black University movement. And that Black University movement came after Nathan Hare was let go by Howard. He writes a copy, and this is where you can trace all of this in 3 issues of the Negro Digest. This is 2 of them, Toward the Black University Part 2 and Part 3, and Part 1 of Toward the Black University is over there on the shelf, but I didn't get up to pick it. He had an essay he called Final Notes on a Negro College, where he's roasting what's going on at HBCUs. And they let him go. And he said, you know, this is what he writes. Now, I took a snapshot and put it down. He said, I walked through the, and let me tie that up. Nathan Hare was let go by Howard University because they accused him. First of all, when his classes got so popular, they started looking in on his classes and they complained to the dean, Frank Snowden, the great Black classicist who was the dean of the College of Liberal Arts at the time. And Nathan Hare's like, don't worry about that. It's academic freedom. He said, plus, if y'all try to let me go, I can always go back to pick cotton. I was the greatest cotton picker I had. When they let Nathan Hare go in 1967, he went and boxed in D.C. because he was a boxer. He grew up wanting to be a boxer. And that's when they told him, you should go to school. And he went into social sciences, went into sociology. Nathan Hare boxed for a while, and then this call came from San Francisco State because the students had taken over the buildings there and they wanted to establish a Black Studies program. It should have been at HBCUs because they were already teaching some of this stuff, and Hare was already at Howard. It should have been probably at Howard. Howard got their program in 1969. San Francisco State, 1968. It could have been 1966 or 67 or even earlier, not just at Howard, but at Tuskegee. Not just at Tuskegee, but at Fisk. Because remember, Ophelia Egypt and Charles Johnson are collecting the stories of enslaved Africans in the 1930s. African people scared of their own shadows at HBCUs, so terrified. In fact, there's a brand new book that just came out. I just started reading it. I got it in the mail about 3 days ago by Ken Goins, who was a professor emeritus at Ohio State University, and Eugene O'Connor, former managing editor of the Ohio State University Press, called The Classics in Black and White, Black Colleges, Classics, Education, Resistance, and Assimilation. This book is about how these Black scholars in the 19th century tried to create a Greek and Latin curriculum to put this intellectual floor under African people. It's complicated because we were in the cemetery this time last week where William Sanders Scarborough talked about thoroughly in here, professor of Greek and Latin at Wilberforce, also married to a white woman, interracial marriage in the 19th century. William Sanders Scarborough came out of enslavement. He was professor of classic European stuff to get these students to have this quote unquote high quality European education. But as Goins and O'Connor promised to write in this book, and as I'm finishing it, I'll determine, you'll see how good they do. I'm sure it's going to be excellent because I kind of skimmed it already. The pushback was from the industrial education kind of thrust and this kind of thing. Remember, Du Bois came to Wilberforce and was teaching mathematics and Latin. Where he got that same, what they call New England education. And the idea of Black studies was anathema to a lot of these people, even as they were fighting to reestablish Egypt. When you read the pages of the AME Church Review, because a lot of AME bishops and other leaders are buried in that same cemetery, Martin Delany and Catherine Delany and their children are buried in. They're having this intellectual warfare within themselves. Well, Nathan Hare, when he comes on the scene in the 1950s, when then in 1960 he comes to Howard, Howard's teaching all that stuff too. And the students who are coming there increasingly are not from that multi-generational family of Black folk. They are coming with the idea that these HBCUs need, in fact, and Nathan Hare used to say, why do you call them historically Black? They ain't Black no more. Anyway, the point is that these students are coming saying this education must transform us, not for me to get an internship, not for me to get a job, not for me and my family to do well by themselves. No, everybody. We need a curriculum to reflect that. When Nathan Hare is pushing for that, they simply do not renew his contract. They are along with several white professors. He said, I couldn't get the black professors to go along with me, except a couple. And even they were kind of scared because they were terrorized by an administration and a culture. Governance doesn't mean all good things. Who we are to each other is often we have the debate on which way forward. What's the best way forward for the race? And they try to suppress what they would call black radicalism. After they let him go, he wrote in this Negro College, in this Negro Digest essay, what happened in the year after they let him go, and he ended up in San Francisco State. He said he came back to D.C. He says, I'll walk through the campus on occasion. And now and again, students wave or grin at me, come over to shake my hand and inquire about my welfare. And it saddens me to see that they are not concerned about their own. It is sadder to see in their faces and reactions, and frankly, frequently frank apologies and rationalizations. Happens a lot. I know that from experience. A recognition that they have played into the hands of dishonesty and disgrace to their own heritage, bartered away self-respect for insulation against the risk of delay or inconvenience in getting themselves ratified, no pun intended, he says, for the rat race they feel lies ahead. In fact, they were talking about civil rights and civil protests, and Nathan Hare once wrote, he said, the only thing civil here at Howard, I would say, is civil defense. Anyway, he says, some of them may never realize how cheaply they sold out. Hare writes, but students, unlike professors, are not stuck forever in the cesspool of Howard's mediocrity. By the way, I would take Howard out and put all the HBCUs in terms of his critique, because remember, Du Bois is raising this same critique. And this isn't a critique of intent. It's a critique of how we frame what we're trying to do for our people. Hare writes, many will be able to shake off the crippling influences of their college years and someday reclaim their lives elsewhere and make full contributions to the world and to their race. The professors who remain must either face dismissal or be left to quiver aimlessly in the quicksand of induced docility. I have watched them day by day. Young professors with style and promise already losing their spark, grumbling in the dark but falling silent and teethy when administrators walk by. Old men now dissatisfied but powerless at this late date to move, driven to drink in bars near the campus, discussing the books begun 5 or 10 years ago, which their frozen pens will now never finish. This is what he says. He says, the day before Christmas Eve, Nathan Hare writes, I stopped by an asylum, friends, to visit a former Howard professor and friend incarcerated there. He's talking about Sterling Brown. Holly and Shriek Garima did a beautiful film called After Winter on Sterling Allen Brown. They show it from time to time in Sankofa. In fact, I'm going to be down there today and again tomorrow. They're showing the Du Bois documentary tomorrow afternoon, and I'll be there for that. And today they're doing a book talk that I'm supposed to be moderating. So check Sankofa's website for that information if you're in town. But I'm going to try to get them to show that Sterling Brown again and do a talk back. Maybe we can get it in Nubia and refill, because it is worth every second. It is brilliant. This man. This is what Nathan Hare writes about his friend Sterling Brown. He had been one of the deans of Negro literature and Black thought in the days when Howard was in its heyday, sought out for guidance by a generation of Black students when Howard's faculty directory read like a who's who among Negro scholars. In late November, someone had told me how he stood in a faculty meeting and angrily threatened, should Howard go through with a proposal to give all this year's honorary degrees to white individuals, this is not Diddy, he would write exposés which would, quote, make Nathan Hare's seem mild. Say, finally, Sterling Brown said, y'all finally pissed me off. Y'all about to get these honorary degree, no, did he? To these white, I'm going to write an expose that's going to make Nathan Hare seem mild. Hare then writes, within 2 weeks, they compelled him to retire. Quote, leave of absence, end quote, beginning the second semester until the end of the year, and then goodbye, after over 30 years on the faculty. In a few days, he was taken by force to St. Elizabeth's Hospital. Coming down the corridor on the day of my visit, he looked well for his age and in good health. On approaching closer, he recognized me and refused to see me, stating that he did not wish to see anybody from Howard again. Last line, Hare writes, I am glad I was a Howard professor, but I am also glad that Howard fired me. Nathan Hare left Howard. The following year, he becomes the first director of the program, the first Black Studies program in the world. San Francisco State, 1968. That's what's in all the books. What's not in the books is the backstory as to how he gets there and what he represents. But now we know, as Paul Harvey might have said, the rest of the story. Within a year, This is from the New York Times, March the 1st, 1969. Hayakawa ousts a Negro teacher. San Francisco, February 28th. A Negro sociologist, Dr. Nathan Hare, a Black Power advocate who has been a central figure in 4 months of turmoil at San Francisco State College, has been dismissed, effective June 30th. College officials confirmed today. Quote, I received a letter from Dr. S.I. Hayakawa last night saying Dr. John Summerkill, former college president, they ran him out, appointed me for only the 1968-69 school year, and that the year would be over June 30th and I would not be rehired, end quote, Dr. Hare said. Dr. Hayakawa, the acting president, had placed Dr. Hare on 30-day suspension for jumping into the stage and interrupting a speech he was making. He said then, quote, Dr. Hare no longer has my backing to head the Black Studies Department, the one he started. Dr. Hare, 35 years old, was hired by Dr. Summerkill in February 1968 after being dismissed from Howard University in Washington for his Black Power activities. No one has been hired to take Dr. Hare's place. College officials said he had the official title of coordinator of minority studies, which they changed to ethnic studies. We mean minorities and then Black studies for that wing of the ethnic studies branch. By the way, there's still a college of ethnic studies. Shout out to San Francisco State University. My man, Baba Obatashaka, who does Saturday classes as well here on YouTube. Of course, Wade Nobles for many years. Theophilo Benga, when he left Temple, went to Africa, came back, went to San Francisco State University. My man Bulalela Wabogo, who was on that faculty for many years. San Francisco State still fights the good fight. New York Times writes, quote, the Black students have said they will not accept anyone else, end quote, Dr. Hare said. Quote, it'll take a way out Uncle Tom to come here, end quote. Last paragraph. He said that he did not plan to leave the San Francisco area. In fact, he didn't. Went and got another PhD, became a clinical psychologist, opened up a private practice. In 1979, started something called the Black Think Tank with his wife, Julia, which is where all these things were published. Oh, one other thing. A little journal they started. And I knew I have I got volume 1, number 1, and a bunch of most of them other, and I'm still a subscriber, although I'll tell y'all about this. And this is called the Black Scholar. I just pulled a few of them. The Black Scholar. The Black Scholar is a journal we heard Nathan Hare referring to at the beginning today when Prof played that clip. The guy was asking him, this is after he was fired at San Francisco State, and he started something called the Black Scholar, 1969. This is an early verse, not volume 1, number 1. This is volume 2, numbers 8 and 9. This is a special issue devoted to the Black prisoner, featuring the writers of Black prisoners. They wrote on every subject. You heard him getting Black leaders. This is one called Black Health. Ron Walters, the great Ron Walters out of D.C. Francis Cress Welsing. You see Charlie Cobb, still with us from SNCC. Doris Wilkinson, writing about Black health. Here is the cover of the second printing of the March 1974 issue, which went out of print, called The Black Woman with Angela Davis. This is the Speakers Bureau that they developed with the Black Scholars. Sonia Sanchez, Roy Ennis, Haki Maabuti, now Don Lee, Amamu Baraka, there's Nathan Hare, Harry Edwards, still with us, Robert Staples wrote on the Black family, John Oliver Killens, the writer, Ruby D. and Ozzie Davis, the Black scholar. He said, we're going to build our own institutions. I don't need to be at a Black college or a white college. We will start this, and me and my wife going to start a think tank. We could talk for days about this, but we won't. The Black Scholar now, the Black Scholar is now going out of print. It is very different now than it was then, because the Black Scholar was a place where Black people wrote, argued, debated, agreed, disagreed, came together. Let us agree to agree, as Marie McKelsey would say, to do Black liberation. The Black Scholar now is academics writing about those kind of things. But, again, these institutions can pull you into them and trap you in them. I'm a subscriber to the Black Scholar. I have a fidelity to the Black Scholar. The interview that we did with Andrew Billingsley, dialogue me and Dr. Billingsley, appeared in about 2 years ago in the Black Scholar. Amy Yeboah Corkamine transcribed it, added an introduction, and published it in the Black Scholar. So I'm in those pages. I believe in it. But ultimately, Knarrative, Nubia, our institutions, the Association for the Study of Classic African Civilizations, Black Classic Press, Third World Press, we have and need our institutions to be the base. This is the lesson of Nathan Hare. Last paragraph, as I said, he said that he did not plan to leave the San Francisco area, but added, and here's the quote, perhaps I could go back to picking cotton. Nathan here, journey well, ancestor. We got the next lap. You ain't got to worry about it. So, we'll stop there, bro.
All right. I love it. I love it. I just wanted to share this.
Please.
I'm not going to play it.
Yes.
At your leisure. But when you talk about governance, and Angela Bofield made transition yesterday at the age of 70. And people were sharing video of her with the Blue Note with Phyllis Hyman.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh.
And you think about, people that aren't household names, but yet lent us some cultural meaning making during a period of time. So
yes, they did. Oh, but Kenyatta Adenia just sent me a message. Here's his quote: "We not like us." Anyway, that actually, there you go, Kendrick. Deal with that, bro. We not like us. Let them kids say we not like us. That might get us somewhere. But no, but I didn't want to. Angela Bofield and Phyllis. See, you don't get Mario. Mario probably somewhere crying right now because he worships Norman Connors. And there's a generation there, and he ain't even old enough. We be laughing at him like, what you know about? If Norman Connors come within 500 miles of D.C., Marvin Bleak is somewhere sitting in whatever little nightclub. That generation with Angela Bofield and Phyllis Hyman, that's like, it ain't Aretha, it's not, but they come and they continue that. It's
Regina
so
Bell, yeah. I mean, but these are names that, like you said, may not get a million views. And it's sad that you said that Chaka Khan making 1.1 million when there are others that had so many more views with so much less to offer us.
But 50 years from now, we'll still be listening to Chaka.
Yes, we will. Yes,
yes, we will. 100 years ago from now, we'll still be listening to Chaka. Who should play Chaka Khan well, Chaka Khan should play. Chaka Khan look good.
I was like, listen, there are people that ain't here, that ain't done the things that she's done.
Facts.
Okay. And for her to look whatever she was doing.
Let me tell you. And she's very confident about it. If you read her memoir.
No, I'm saying that well preserved. But maybe there's something to that, living your life in such a free and open manner that
and letting that energy of the people. I'll never forget Miss Barbara Murrow, who was vice president of student affairs at Tennessee State for many ways, one of my mothers, still around, still in Nashville. She was over all the concerts because student affairs people, they got to run out of it. This was the 70s. Chaka Khan on the Black College tour. Oh, by the way, Nathan Hare is the one who brought Muhammad Ali to Howard. That's one of the reasons they let him go. If y'all ever see that clip where where Muhammad Ali is holding that mesh to the black man up, talking about black is best, his famous black is best speech, look right over his shoulder. Nathan Hare is standing right there. They shut down the auditoriums. They said there will be no more lectures for the rest of the year. So he puts up a microphone outside Douglas Hall and 4,000 people show up. So when y'all see that clip, Nathan Hare is in that clip. But anyway, these black colleges, they would let anybody come and perform. This is when Stevie Wonder and everybody was out. Chaka Khan, Ms. Murrow said, Chaka Khan showed up. And she said, I looked at this little slip of a thing. And whatever she was on, she wasn't in no shape to even talk or walk. She just kind of, she said, they were backstage. I'm like, Lord, we're going to have to cancel this concert. These children are going to run me out of the street. I don't know what they're. The music went on. And she said, somebody else just showed up. She floated out there like the person I saw, it wasn't even her. I don't understand how. Now, I can't imagine how many times did Chaka Khan say, I'm not letting these people down. They came here to see me. You know what I'm saying?
Whatever demons were holding her, the music was more powerful.
The music was more powerful. And the people. We love you, Chaka Khan.
Yes. and the fact that we can do that while she's still here. Feels so good. Feels so good. Yeah. Love you too. Yeah. See you on Monday and then Friday on Urban View.
Friday on Urban View. I'm loving it.
Y'all get your SiriusXM app. Get it together. It's $1 for 3 months. Y'all can do that. Y'all can do that. Also, the Global Majority drop ends today. So
I saw that. There's no Nubian deal, is there?
There is. Of course, we always have a deal for Nubians. You already know. We already have a special code for the Nubians.
Come on.
Theglobalmajority.com. Get your
drop.
Yes. All right. I love you. Love everybody. I'll see some of y'all on Monday. Dr. Black is going to be on with me on Monday.
Oh,
So,
so
yeah.
y'all gonna really get it going. Ask Dan to see what they did in Arkansas around Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth weekend. Y'all be safe. And remember, it's about self-determination. Our people use this as a time to connect with ourselves. Juneteenth belongs to us.
Amen.
Amen.
And Ashe.
Ashe.
All right. Bye, y'all.